Chapter 126, The Death of Muzan. Aoki slowly approached Muzan Kibutsuji and looked down at him. How miserable. Muzan Kibutsuji was covered in wounds, with countless holes puncturing his body. The left side of his upper torso and the right side of his head were entirely gone, revealing 2 hearts and 3 brains. His flesh and blood squirmed slowly, but the regeneration was almost non-existent. Traitor! Muzan's eyes were filled with despair. A monster had appeared before, but why was there another one now? This new monster was his own creation, yet it was far more powerful than he could have ever imagined. Ah! Muzan tried to split himself again, but his body stopped just as it began to expand. Aoki's expression remained indifferent as he slowly lifted his foot. Snap! Muzan's right knee shattered. Kocho Kane and the others stared in disbelief at the broken figure struggling on the ground. Was this really the ancestor of demons, the one who had wreaked havoc on the world for thousands of years, causing countless deaths and despair? Could this Muzan Kibutsuji be an imposter? They knew that was impossible. Muzan had truly reached the end of his rope. Realizing this, their hearts pounded wildly, yet none dared to relax, fearing that in an instant, Muzan might recover his former invincible self. Only when Muzan was dead and gone could they truly be at ease. No, I can't die here. How could I die here? Muzan dragged his broken body forward, leaving a trail of blood on the ground. But the next moment, bang! 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 All the vital joints in his body exploded, twisting his limbs into grotesque shapes. Ah! Muzan screamed in despair, not from physical pain, but from the overwhelming fear of death. Aoki grabbed Muzan by the neck and lifted him into the air. Muzan stared at Aoki with his one remaining eye, filled with pain, regret, unwillingness, and fear. A slight change in his thoughts at the beginning had led him to this end. Intense remorse gnawed at his heart, causing his body to twitch. Aoki suddenly smiled. Muzan, do you remember when we first met? It was just like this, except the roles were reversed. Muzan said nothing, he couldn't speak, as Aoki's grip on his neck was too tight. Aoki wasn't interested in hearing Muzan speak. He continued, Muzan, for all the crimes you've committed, you deserve to be torn apart and tortured before your execution. But after thinking about it, I've decided to give up on that idea. Everyone, including me, probably just wants you to die quickly. So, in a way, you're lucky. With that, an invisible vortex began to swirl around Aoki's palm. No, no, no. Muzan's body trembled, his eyes filled with terror, but he was utterly powerless against Aoki's grip. Kibutsuji Muzan has been killed. The ultimate mission, the road to the Demon King, is completed, and the reward has been issued. White Walker successfully advances to King of White Walkers. 2 notifications echoed in Aoki's mind. He paid them no heed and slowly lowered his arm. It's over. It's all over. A whole year had passed since he became a demon due to an accident. In that year, there was hardly any rest. He had sought out demons, honed his combat skills and awareness, gradually increasing his strength. Finally, the White Walker had reached its peak, and Muzan Kibutsuji was dead. The long-standing grudge was finally settled. I wonder if Master's soul is still here. If it is, he should be able to rest in peace now, Aoki thought as he looked up at the sky. A relaxed smile appeared on his face, and he turned to walk toward where Kane and the others were gathered. Everyone stared at him blankly, their eyes tracking his movements. They seemed on the verge of speaking, but hesitated. Just as Aoki was about to say something, Tamayo suddenly stepped forward. Mr. Aoki, did Muzan Kibutsuji die a miserable death? She asked, her excitement making her forget to conceal Aoki's real name. No one paid attention to such a small detail at this moment. They all stared at Aoki, waiting for his answer. Some of them had seen Aoki devour demons for the first time and didn't fully understand what had just happened. Those who were more familiar with it hoped to hear something definitive from him. Aoki didn't keep anyone in suspense. He's dead. Completely dead. From now on, there will no longer be a creature called Muzan Kibutsuji in this world. For a moment, there was silence. Then, very good. Mitsuri Kanroji jumped up and down, cheering. Her fair face turned red with excitement, making her look particularly vibrant. Yuzui Tengen didn't hide his excitement either, laughing heartily. Ha ha ha, good riddance. Good riddance. Sister. Shinobu called out, turning to her elder sister. Kane smiled and took her sister's hand. It's over, Shinobu. She then looked over at Aoki. Defeating Muzan Kibutsuji without any casualties was something they had never dared to imagine. It was all thanks to Mr. Aoki. When they first met at Mount Natagumo, she never imagined things would turn out like this. Perhaps the best decision she ever made was to keep Mr. Aoki around and give them a chance to work together. Rengoku Kyojuro was momentarily stunned, then a bright smile spread across his face. Who would have thought that the Demon Slayer Corps' 1,000-year dream would be realized in their generation? His father would be thrilled to hear this news. Takedo Muchiro, still somewhat dazed, felt the inexplicable anger in his heart slowly dissipating as familiar memories resurfaced in his mind. Himejima Gyomii clasped his hands together, tears streaming down his face. Sanemi Shinazugawa's usual angry expression softened, while a look of relief appeared in the eyes of the stoic Iguro Abanai. Tomioka Ju stood off to the side, his face expressionless, but with a gentle look in his eyes. Sister, Sabito, we've defeated Muzan Kibutsuji. No one will suffer at the hands of demons anymore. After hearing Aoki's confirmation, Tamayo felt as if all the strength had drained from her body. She slowly collapsed to the ground, laughing and crying, letting go of her usual elegance and composure. Ha ha ha, he's dead, finally dead. Hundreds of years of waiting had finally borne fruit. She could die without regrets now. Just then, a hand appeared before her. Tamayo looked up to see Aoki smiling at her. She wiped her tears, took Aoki's hand, and stood up. Chapter 127, The King of the White Walkers and Soul Shock. Take care of yourself. See you later. Ha ha ha, I'm definitely getting a good sleep when I get back. Everyone said their goodbyes and left, leaving only Aoki, Mitsuri, Tamayo, and the Kocho sisters. Even though it was Aoki who had brought them together, he regretted that he could only do so much, picking them up, but not sending them off. The five of them strolled under the moonlight, and the atmosphere was cheerful. Kane sighed, it still feels like a dream. Muzan Kibutsuji died so easily. It wasn't easy at all, Aoki shook his head. In terms of stamina, Muzan Kibutsuji was undoubtedly the most resilient of all the demons Aoki had faced. Although it wasn't a particularly dangerous fight, it was certainly exhausting. And it wasn't just the battle itself. They had been preparing to kill Muzan Kibutsuji for a long time, making poisons, setting up plans, and so on. The aging drug was practically useless, and the cell-damaging poison didn't have much effect either, Tamayo remarked. Thankfully, Mr. Aoki was strong enough. The aging poison did have some effect, otherwise, Muzan wouldn't have destroyed so quickly, Aoki replied. His battle with Muzan had lasted about 20 minutes in total, which meant that Muzan had aged about 2,000 years during that time. While those years might have meant little to Muzan in his prime, they were devastating after he'd been weakened by Aoki's demon devourer. Mitsuri, walking ahead happily, suddenly turned around. With Muzan Kibutsuji dead, does that mean if we kill all the demons left in the world, there will be no more demons in the future? Aoki shook his head. Once Muzan Kibutsuji died, all the demons under his control perished. The only demons left in this world now are me, Ms. Tamayo, and Yoshiro. Mitsuri blinked. Is that so? That's great. The others looked calm, having already known this. Aoki stopped and suggested, let's head straight back to the butterfly estate. Everyone agreed, and they took his arms on both sides. In a flash, the world changed. Aoi, Kaneo, and the three little girls sat in a room in silence, all looking very nervous. Creak. The sound of the door opening made them all rush out without hesitation, and they saw a man and 4 women standing in the yard. Kane smiled gently and said, "Oi, Kaneo, we have defeated Muzan Kibutsuji." Kaneo looked a bit confused, while Oi was excited, and the 3 little girls cheered loudly. Even though it was very late, everyone was in high spirits. They moved a table into the yard, set out some cakes and snacks, and ate while chatting. It wasn't until the second half of the night that they finally dispersed. Aoki returned to his room and, on a whim, activated his system. He hadn't had time to check it earlier, but now he could finally see what he had gained. The familiar azure blue screen appeared before his eyes. Name, Aoki. Strength, 26. Constitution, 25. Intelligence, 25. Agility, 25. Occupation, Hunter, King of the White Walkers, Martial Artist. Free attribute points, 10. King of the White Walkers. Quality. Level, LV20, 0/2000. Skills, Demon Blood 6, Space Shuttle 2, Transparent World 2, Demon Devourer 2, Soul Shock, not learned yet. Aoki first checked his job title. As expected, White Walker had advanced to King of the White Walkers, and its quality had increased from 2 stars to 2.5 stars. Despite reaching the peak level, he could continue to grow stronger. After killing Kokashibo and reaching level 20, he had gained a lot of experience. Killing Muzan Kibutsuji had provided even more. However, none of that experience carried over. Everything had to start anew. Aoki looked up and suddenly felt a wave of relief, all the frustration over the lost experience disappearing. A full 10 free attribute points. A level 20, 2.5-star profession granted exactly 10 more free attribute points than a level 20, 2-star profession. He had wondered how these points would be distributed if they reappeared, but he didn't expect them to appear directly as attribute points. Simple and straightforward. But he liked it. 10 free attribute points were enough to take his strength to the next level. But then again, I'm already invincible in this world, so does it really matter if my strength continues to improve? Aoki shook his head, dismissing the thought. Regardless, increasing his strength was always a good thing. He then looked at the skill bar and noticed a new skill, the 3rd reward from the Road of the Demon King. Soul Shock? Aoki's eyes gradually lit up. His abilities were now almost perfect. For movement, he had Space Shuttle, which worked like a combination of flash and teleport with no cooldown time, extremely useful for both attacking and retreating. He had his own unique style of offense. Although it didn't have a single, devastating move, it was more than sufficient for most situations. As for defense, it was hardly necessary. With infinite regeneration, he could easily heal any injury. His perception was covered by Transparent World, allowing him 360-degree awareness without relying on his eyes and even providing a predictive edge. The only thing he lacked was a control skill. Soul Shock filled that gap. As the name suggests, Soul Shock is a mental attack on the soul. In mild cases, it can cause confusion and slow movements, while in severe cases, it can lead to the soul being destroyed. It was somewhat similar to Muzan Kibutsuji's shock waves. However, while Muzan's shock waves targeted the body, Soul Shock targeted the soul. The latter was more insidious and harder to defend against, though it didn't cause as much damage as the former. At close range, Muzan's shock wave could even kill Hashira. However, Soul Shock was unlikely to cause instant death unless there was a massive power gap. It was primarily a control skill, with its effects varying depending on the enemy's strength. Additionally, against certain special enemies, Soul Shock could have miraculous effects. But Aoki's joy was short-lived as he soon discovered a serious problem. The current status of Soul Shock showed that it could be learned, but the learning requirement was 6 free skill points. Well, that's to be expected, Aoki sighed, suppressing his excitement. After all, it was tied to the King of the White Walkers. He had hoped to learn it with just 1 skill point, but that was clearly impossible. 6 skill points were acceptable, but the real question was, where would he get them? Currently, there were 3 ways for him to obtain skill points: quests, leveling up, and devouring demons. The first option could only be waited upon passively. As for the second and third, both required killing demons. But with Muzan Kibutsuji dead, only 3 demons remained in the world, including himself. Where would he collect enough skill points now? ___________. Chapter 128, Demon King's Power and Extreme Enhancement. It doesn't seem impossible, Aoki muttered, tapping the table with a thoughtful expression. After devouring Muzan Kibutsuji, his gains were far greater than what was displayed on the system panel. There were many benefits that weren't explicitly stated. Aoki studied his new abilities for a while. While his strength hadn't directly increased, many of his abilities had undergone a profound transformation. Simply put, he had evolved from an ordinary demon into the King of Demons. The titled King of the White Walkers was not given at random, he was now a true demon king. He possessed almost all of Muzan Kibutsuji's abilities, and was even stronger. First, his regenerative ability had increased significantly, reaching or even exceeding Muzan Kibutsuji's level. Second, his physical stamina was now almost infinite, allowing him to regenerate endlessly unless special means were used. While Muzan had been weakened by heavy poisons and had been afraid of Yoriichi Tsujikuni's red sword and sunlight, Aoki had already conquered the sun, making him even more invincible than Muzan. The damage caused to demons by the Ninchuran sword and red sword essentially came from sunlight. Since he had overcome the sunlight, he no longer had any weaknesses. None of the known forces in this world could cause him substantial harm, they could only try to deplete his stamina, and his stamina was practically limitless. Even if Yoriichi Tsujikuni were reborn, Aoki doubted he could defeat him now. Third, his body control abilities had also been enhanced. He could now alter his limbs and torso at will and had a multitude of tendrils sprouting from his body. Unlike Muzan, he didn't have as many tendrils, but he possessed a unique bone whip that extended from his spine and protruded from his back, ending with a coldly glowing bone blade. This feature was somewhat similar to Tanjiro's transformation into a demon king. The whip seemed to be standard equipment for a demon king and would add more variety to Aoki's attack methods, though it would require him to adjust his fighting style. While the tendrils could be put aside for now, the bone whip seemed worth developing. However, this would be more challenging than creating the Aoki style. Although his strength was vastly different from ordinary humans, their body shapes, attack methods, and logic were similar enough to draw inspiration from. But with the bone whip, he had no frame of reference, he'd have to study and master it on his own. The talents acquired under the martial artist role weren't quite suited for this, and integrating the whip into his combat system would require significant effort. Fortunately, what he lacked least now was time. Fourth, he had acquired the ability to mimic others. As long as they were human, he could imitate their body shape, appearance, and even gender. After the transformation, even his smell would change, which was quite astonishing. This ability extended to clothing as well. Fifth, he had inherited Muzan Kibutsuji's ability to split his body to escape, though this held little use for him. His space shuttle ability made escaping far more efficient than mere body splitting. Sixth, and perhaps most significantly, Aoki could now use his own blood to create demons. If the Demon Slayer Corps knew this, I wonder if they would regret working with me, Aoki mused to himself. However, he had no intention of creating a horde of demons to devour humans, like Muzan Kibutsuji. In fact, he didn't intend to use this ability in most situations. The reason was simple, the system's power was the only thing allowing him to resist the urge to consume humans. The demons he created would be no different from those created by Muzan Kibutsuji, they, too, would live by eating humans. There was no way he could do such a thing. Still, having this ability brought 2 advantages. First, he wouldn't have to worry about starving. He could only consume demons, but with none left in the world, he couldn't exactly devour Tamayo or Yashiro, could he? Now, he had a solution. If things ever got desperate, he could turn a deserving person into a demon and eat them. This was fundamentally different from cannibalism, though it was a bit distasteful. He was not someone who couldn't adapt for the sake of survival. However, Aoki wasn't really worried about this issue. Muzan Kibutsuji had survived for nearly 10,000 years, and he had only felt somewhat weaker for it. Compared to Muzan Kibutsuji, Aoki was now stronger in all aspects and should be able to last even longer. In other words, he could likely go without food for at least tens of thousands of years. 10,000 years from now, perhaps the secret of demons would have been cracked, and he might no longer need to consume humans or demons. He could potentially eat like a normal person. The most important function of this ability was that it allowed him to continue leveling up. He could create demons himself and then kill them to gain experience points. Yet, Aoki also felt a sense of unease. When he was level 18, there were very few demons left that provided more than 5 experience points. Now, at level 20, having advanced to the King of the White Walkers, how many demons could still provide experience? Would he have to create high-level demons? Not to mention how rare it would be to find individuals with the talent to become upper-level demons. They would still need to consume humans to grow. If he did this, he would become another Muzan Kibutsuji, causing even greater destruction. Aoki shook his head, silently dismissing that idea, and looked at the system panel again. There was also a reward for completing the road to the Demon King, the option to choose any skill and enhance it to its ultimate level. He studied it and soon figured out what was involved. The 4 skills eligible for extreme enhancement were Demon Blood and others, excluding Soul Shock. The effect of extreme enhancement was essentially to elevate a skill that had reached its current limit to the next level. All 4 skills held great potential. Demon Blood, for example, was the core of the White Walker class. Each upgrade increased all attributes slightly, enhancing every aspect of his demonic nature. Now, having overcome sunlight and become the Demon King, what would happen if this skill were pushed to its ultimate limit? Demon Devourer embodied the otherness of the White Walker class. The first upgrade increased attribute points, the second increased skill points. What would a third upgrade offer? The possibilities for Space Shuttle and Transparent World after their extreme enhancement were also thrilling to consider. As he stared at the system panel, Aoki hesitated to make a decision. Unlike before, this was not a matter of choosing the order for upgrades. This was a unique reward, likely a one-time offer. Even if he encountered another ultimate mission, it would likely apply to another class. With 4 skills that all held promise and only one chance to enhance them to their peak, he needed to choose carefully. After much deliberation, Aoki decided to put this option on hold for the time being. He had no urgent needs at the moment, the enemies were all dead, and his combat capability was unrivaled in this world. He didn't need to rush into a decision, he had plenty of time to think it through. Chapter 129, Aoki's Pardon. There are 3 types of rewards in The Road to the Demon King. The profession has advanced, but there's no way to upgrade. New skills have been obtained, but there are no skill points to learn them, and an opportunity for extreme enhancement has been granted, but now there's the difficulty of choice. Let's deal with some of this first, Aoki thought, turning his attention back to the system. He had 10 free attribute points available. He decided to distribute them evenly, allocating 2 points each to strength and constitution and 3 points each to agility and intelligence. Boom! A surge of immense power exploded within him, and a powerful energy coursed through his body. For a moment, Aoki felt as if he could shatter the world with just one strike. In reality, this was just an illusion caused by the sudden spike in strength. Name, Aoki. Strength, 28. Constitution, 27. Intelligence, 28. Agility, 28. Occupation, Hunter, King of the White Walkers, Martial Artist. King of the Others. Quality. Level, LV20, 0/2000. Skills, Demon Blood 6, Space Shuttle 2, Transparent World 2, Demon Devourer 2, Soul Shock, not learned yet. Nearly all attributes had reached 28 points. Aoki showed a satisfied expression. If he were to fight Muzan Kibutsuji again, the battle would certainly not drag on as long as it did before. After confirming that there was nothing else missing, Aoki turned off the system and looked out the window. Before he knew it, dawn had broken. Ding ding ding. There was a knock on the door. When Aoki opened it, he was immediately surprised. Miss Tamayo? Tamayo removed her sun hat and smiled. It feels so good to walk in the sunlight. Only after we obtain the blue spider lily and develop the drug to fully overcome the sunlight can we truly stand in it, Aoki replied, inviting Miss Tamayo inside. He had worn a sun hat for so long that he understood well how uncomfortable it was to walk in the sun with one. Surrounded by the deadly light, it felt like walking a tightrope thousands of feet in the air with only a safety rope to rely on. Although there was no real danger unless something went wrong, the fear was always there, lingering in the back of the mind. Tamayo said, Mr. Aoki, let's go for a walk. Alright, wait, what? Aoki started to agree out of habit, then stopped mid-sentence as he realized the implication. Mr. Aoki, you've overcome the sunlight, haven't you? Tamayo looked at Aoki, speaking slowly. Though phrased as a question, her tone was certain, it didn't sound like a guess at all. Aoki was silent for a moment, then nodded calmly. How did you figure it out, Miss Tamayo? Tamayo smiled and said, It's because of the blood you gave me, Mr. Aoki. Compared to the blood of ordinary demons, yours seemed like it came from an entirely different creature. Based on my previous research, I deduced that the owner of such blood had most likely conquered the sunlight. Who else could it be but you? If it were any other demon, Muzan Kibutsuji would have gone mad long before last night. I didn't expect that I'd be the one to give myself away, Aoki sighed, glancing to Tamayo. He seemed to want to say something but stopped himself. Was her reason to live gone again? Sensing his thoughts, Tamayo smiled gently and said, Actually, I came today to discuss this with you. Aoki felt a spark of hope, perhaps the situation wasn't as bleak as he had feared. Tamayo put her sunshade hat back on and suggested, Mr. Aoki, let's talk while we walk. Alright, Aoki agreed, following her out into the bright sunlight that warmed their bodies. Since November, the weather had grown colder, and warm days like this were becoming rare. Perhaps even the gods are pleased to see Muzan Kibutsuji defeated, Tamayo joked with a smile. The remark might have been light-hearted, but it struck a chord with Aoki. Gods? Could there really be gods in this world? He had once discussed this with Ubuyashiki Kagaya, who believed gods existed, but he had never seen any divine beings nor heard of them intervening in human affairs. They continued walking until they stopped at the cherry blossom tree named Sakura. Unfortunately, it wasn't blooming season, so the tree stood bare. Tamayo turned to Aoki and said, Don't worry, Mr. Aoki, I won't commit suicide. Why should I die when I can still live? Aoki frowned slightly. This statement seemed to indicate a deeper issue. Tamayo's expression grew more serious. I'm not trying to be dismissive, Mr. Aoki. Although my wish has been fulfilled, I have no regrets left, even if I were to die now. However, I have yet to repay the debt I owe you. When the day comes that you no longer need me, then I may consider ending my life. After a brief pause, she added, If I really wanted to die, I wouldn't be here today. Aoki nodded in agreement. Indeed, for demons, committing suicide was simple, they only needed to step into the sunlight. The fact that Miss Tamayo had come wearing a sunshade hat made her intentions clear. Miss Tamayo, although I have overcome the sun, I do have something very important that I need your help with. The search for the blue spider lily is not a mere excuse, Aoki explained. Tamayo nodded slightly. You defeating Muzan Kibutsuji feels like a new lease on life for me. Please, tell me what you need. Aoki felt a headache coming on. Although Tamayo seemed calm, she was actually trapped in profound negative emotions. It felt like living was more painful than dying for her. If not for her desire to repay her debt, she might have already chosen to end her life. This wasn't acceptable. He had saved her, only for her to feel even more tormented. Moreover, in such a state, how could she be expected to work efficiently? But Aoki wasn't particularly good at comforting others, which made things difficult. He carefully chose his words. Miss Tamayo, although I don't know all the details about your husband and children, I do know they would want you to look forward, not remain fixated on the past. Tamayo's eyes flickered, and she pursed her lips. Thank you, Mr. Aoki. Aoki continued, as for those whom you've killed, I'll pardon you on their behalf. Tamayo was taken aback. Why? Am I not qualified? Aoki smiled, in terms of strength, I'm the strongest in the world. I can change counties with my power alone. In terms of merit, although my actions were primarily for myself, it was I who played the central role in defeating Muzan Kibutsuji. Isn't that enough to offset your crimes? Tamayo gazed at him, seemingly in a daze. Furthermore, Aoki added, you also contributed significantly to Muzan Kibutsuji's defeat. So, Miss Tamayo, from now on, you can set aside all your guilt and live with your head held high. Tamayo was silent for a long time, then smiled. Doesn't this mean I owe you even more? It feels like I'll never be able to repay this debt. Then be prepared to work for me for free, forever, Aoki said. He wasn't sure if his words had persuaded her, but it didn't matter. They had plenty of time to figure it out. Chapter 130, Future Planning. When Kane opened the door, bright sunlight instantly filled the room. She raised her hand and placed it across her eyebrows to block out the sunlight. What a nice day. Under the cherry tree in the yard, two people were standing, one of them wearing a wide bamboo hat. At this time, she already knew that it was a special item called a sunshade hat, which could protect demons from sunlight damage. Before overcoming the sunlight, Mr. Aomura had relied on it to move around during the day. I had deceived Shinobu back then. Thinking of this, a smile appeared on Kane's face, and she walked toward the two of them. Mr. Aomura, Ms. Tamayo, what are you talking about? Aoki replied, we are discussing future plans. Kane asked curiously, what was the result? What are Mr. Aomura and Ms. Tamayo planning to do in the future? I am a doctor, and I will continue to do my job, said Tamayo. Aoki said, I also plan to learn some medical skills. I hope you can give me some advice in the future. Kane's eyes lit up. Mr. Aomura, are you interested in medicine? Aoki nodded and said, not just medicine. I'm interested in many industries. I'm considering learning all of them and becoming a master of all professions. Although the White Walker had advanced to the king of the White Walkers, there were no demons to kill, and it was difficult to upgrade. There was no pressure from enemies either. He would have a lot of free time next and could think about his previous ideas, namely, collecting more half-star professions, accumulating skills, and stacking attributes. In addition to improving his strength, this was also a way to pass the time. There was no need to eat, drink, sleep, or even have basic human needs like food, clothing, housing, and transportation. Without something to occupy him, the long years ahead would be unbearably boring. Master of all professions? Kane blinked her eyes. Considering Mr. Aomura's long life, it didn't seem like an exaggeration. And what about you, Ms. Kane? Aoki asked. Kane pursed her lips and chuckled, Shinobu and I will continue to run the butterfly house, but from now on, it will just be an ordinary clinic. While the three were talking, Shinobu walked in from outside with a huge package in her hand. Aoki felt that this scene looked familiar and asked, what is this? Shinobu said, it's a gift for a friend. Are you in such a hurry to meet your friend? Aoki asked in surprise. You just defeated Muzan Kibutsuji yesterday. Don't you plan to take a break? I didn't do much in defeating Muzan Kibutsuji, so I don't need to rest. I want to tell Taka this good news as soon as possible. After saying this, Shinobu waved her hand and walked inside. Aoki looked at her back and said, Shinobu seems very close to that friend. Kane smiled and said, yes, they have similar personalities and get along very well. Aoki thought about it and realized that it was true. Takina was serious about her work and a bit methodical, while Shinobu was also a serious person. He retracted his gaze and said, "Ms. Tamayo, I will take you back now." Tamayo nodded. "I was just about to talk to Mr. Aomura about this. It's time to go back and tell Yashiro the good news." "Are you leaving now?" Kane was a little reluctant. She admired Miss Tamayo's profound knowledge, kind character, and intellectual elegance, and felt like she had found a confidant. Tamayo smiled and said, "Ms. Kane is welcome to visit Asakusa in the future." She also had a good impression of Kane, who was an extremely gentle girl. Muzan Kibutsuji had died tragically, and all the demons had disappeared. From now on, they didn't have to hide anymore and could live openly in the sun. Aoki interrupted, "It's easy to meet, just let me know." The two were stunned for a moment, then smiled at each other. After agreeing to visit each other frequently, Aoki took Miss Tamayo away. Yashiro was feeding Shichamaru when he heard the sound of a door opening. He quickly put down his work and walked over. He came to the living room and saw two people in the room at a glance. Tamayo heard the noise and turned to look. "Yashiro." "Lady Tamayo." Yashiro looked at Aoki and suddenly realized something. "Master Tamayo, could it be?" Tamayo smiled and nodded. "Muzan Kibutsuji is dead. He actually did it." Yashiro looked at Aoki and felt a bit of admiration in his heart. He didn't know exactly how strong Muzan Kibutsuji was, but from Lady Tamayo's description, he understood that Muzan was an extremely terrifying existence that almost no one could contend with. "I'll come and have a drink with you guys later." Aoki nodded to the two of them, activated the space shuttle, and instantly returned to his room in the butterfly house. "I wonder if Shinobu has set off yet." As he thought about it, he walked outside. When he opened the door, a figure suddenly came into view. "Miss Kenroji?" "Mr. Aomura, I'm here to say goodbye to you." Mitsuri Kenroji put down the hand that was about to knock on the door. She was wearing a brown demon slayer uniform, her chest was noticeably large, and she wore black stockings on her legs that contrasted sharply with her fair skin. Her long cherry-colored hair was braided into two pigtails, and she had a bright smile on her face. "What are you going to do?" Aoki asked. "Go home." Mitsuri looked very happy. Aoki suddenly realized. He was not in a hurry to find Shinobu, so he led Mitsuri Kenroji into the room, poured her some tea, and asked casually, "Miss Kenroji, what do you plan to do in the future?" Mitsuri tapped her chin lightly with her finger and swayed slightly. "I haven't thought about it yet. There are no more demons, which is a good thing, but the demon slayers seem to be useless. The demon slayer corps should be disbanded, right?" When she said this, her eyes lit up, and her tone became lighter. "These days, I find that using my power to help others is really a happy thing, so next, I might open a cooking restaurant." "Why?" This turn of events caught Aoki off guard. What does a restaurant have to do with helping people? Mitsuri opened her eyes wide. "To help others, you don't have to use brute force. I hope to make others feel happy through cooking." A strange thought suddenly appeared in Aoki's mind. If Mitsuri's restaurant eventually goes bankrupt, it is probably because she eats too much and spends more than she earns. Mitsuri is a big eater who can eat and loves to eat. Certainly, for Mitsuri, being able to let go of her obsession with her own supernatural powers is itself a huge growth. Maybe I can research food that demons can eat in the future. Mitsuri's eyes curved into crescents, and her tone was full of longing. Aoki was stunned for a moment, then a smile appeared on his face. "I'm looking forward to it." Chapter 131, Going Home. On the wide road, three people walked side by side. The man in the middle had black hair and golden eyes, he was tall and handsome. To his left, a tall, beautiful girl walked with graceful steps, while a petite and cute girl accompanied them on the right. Their presence together on the road was striking and drew the attention of passers-by. After Aoki escorted Mitsuri back home, he happened to stumble upon Shinobu, who was just about to leave. Kane decided to join them, so what began as a solo journey quickly turned into a three-person trip. Shinobu glanced at Aoki and asked, "Why are you so insistent on coming with me?" Aoki smiled and replied, "It's fine. Let's go meet her together." Shinobu hesitated for a moment before saying, "Takaina is very beautiful, but she already has a fiancé, so don't get any ideas." A strange expression crossed Aoki's face. "Don't worry. Do you think I would bother a girl like that?" "It's not that," Shinobu said thoughtfully. "I just get the feeling that you're being overly enthusiastic, as if you have some hidden motive." Aoki sighed. "You're quite perceptive." Kane chimed in, "Actually, Miss Takaina is quite pitiable." Shinobu looked at Aoki and explained, "Takina's father was turned into a demon by Muzan Kibutsuji and almost killed them. Takina's fiancé stayed behind to cover their retreat, giving Takaina and her mother time to escape." Aoki lowered his eyes. No one understood this past better than he did. However, Shinobu continued, "Things didn't turn out as badly as they could have. Even though Takina's fiancé was just an ordinary person, he miraculously managed to defeat the demon. But for some reason, he never showed up again. It wasn't that he didn't show up, he just didn't dare to meet them." Aoki asked, "How did you two meet?" Shinobu replied, "My sister and I were returning from a mission when we met Takaina and her mother by chance. When we got back to their home, the battle was already over, and Takina's fiancé was nowhere to be seen." Aoki nodded, understanding. It was just as he had guessed. Kane looked at Aoki curiously. "Mr. Aomura, do you have any relatives?" Shinobu also looked over, intrigued. They had always been curious about Mr. Aomura's past, but had found it difficult to ask before. Now that Muzan Kibutsuji was defeated, they felt freer to inquire. "Yes," Aoki replied with a hint of a smile in his eyes. "I'll introduce them to you later." "All right," Kane and Shinobu both nodded, unaware of anything unusual. Not long after, the three arrived at their destination. Under Shinobu's guidance, they quickly found the yard where Takaina lived. Shinobu eagerly knocked on the door. "Coming," called a clear, bright voice from the yard. The door creaked open, and a young girl appeared before them. Her long green hair cascaded like a waterfall on either side of her fair face. She wore a simple long dress, her face was bare of any makeup, yet she looked incredibly beautiful. "Takaina." Shinobu greeted her with a smile. "Shinobu." "Oh, Miss Kane is here too, welcome." Takina's voice trailed off, and her expression froze. Shinobu blinked in surprise. Why is Takaina so excited today? At that moment, she saw Takaina open her arms wide. Is this a hug? Shinobu thought. She was about to extend her arms as well, but quickly realized that Takina's target wasn't her but someone standing behind her. Who's behind me? My sister? No. With a rush, Takaina threw herself into Aoki's arms. This is? Shinobu's mouth slowly opened, and Kane's gaze froze. Aoki held the trembling girl close, gently stroking her soft, long hair. His expression was tender. I'm back, he murmured. Takaina buried her face in his chest, her voice muffled. Why did you take so long to return? I'm sorry, Aoki whispered. Ever since that day, I've had nightmares almost every night. I'm sorry. Why did you only send a letter instead of coming to see us? I'm sorry. Mom and I were so worried about you. We missed you so much. I know, he replied softly. Why only now? Takaina asked, her voice breaking. Aoki held her tighter. I'm here now. With that, Takaina could no longer hold back her tears. Shinobu finally regained her senses, her mind slowly piecing together the truth. Judging from the conversation between Aoki and Takaina, she had finally understood. Aoki was Takina's fiancé. No wonder he had been so eager. He wanted to go home. No wonder he left only a letter and never showed up again, Shinobu thought to herself, staring blankly at the couple embracing each other. He became a demon. And Muzan Kibutsuji considered him an enemy. To keep Taka and her mother safe, he had to stay away until Muzan was defeated. Shinobu realized, with some relief, that if they had met Muzan Kibutsuji back then, both she and her sister would have likely died, never having the chance to meet and know Mr. Aomura, let alone see the day Muzan was defeated. But he knew everything all along and still acted clueless on the way here. He did that on purpose. Shinobu felt a flash of annoyance and a little bit of envy. Kane, meanwhile, had figured out another part of the puzzle. She realized why Aomura had always treated her and her sister differently from everyone else. I thought of many reasons, she mused, but now I see the truth. He must have known that we helped Taka and her mother. Could it be that Mr. Aomura saved me because of that? Kane wondered, biting her lip thoughtfully. Across the yard, two middle-aged women were sitting. Both of them stopped what they were doing, their mouths agape, as they watched the young couple embrace. The slightly plump woman's face was filled with curiosity. Is he Takina's fiancé? Shortly after moving in, Takina's beauty had spread throughout the town. At the right age for marriage, she naturally drew attention. This woman had even considered matching her son with Taka. However, rumors soon surfaced that Taka already had a fiancé. Disappointed, many had given up. But as time passed and this mysterious fiancé never appeared, some began to doubt. As a neighbor, the plump woman had shared these doubts. She certainly hadn't expected the fiancé to show up today. The other woman was staring at Aoki. He's quite handsome, and he and Taka make a beautiful couple. The plump woman nodded. Not only is he good-looking, but he dresses well. He doesn't seem like an ordinary person. Those who gossiped can shut up now, the woman chuckled. Taka does have a fiancé, and a very fine one at that. ____________. Chapter 132, Demon Slayer Corps Disband. The touch was real, the scent was real, this was no dream. Taka lay in Aoki's arms, reluctant to move, vaguely sensing that there was something she had forgotten. After a while, the thought suddenly struck her, and she quickly lifted her head. Aoki, we need to tell my mother you're back right away. Yes, let's go inside, Aoki agreed. The two of them walked into the yard together, with Kane and Shinobu following quietly behind. At that moment, Aomura stepped out of the house carrying a basin of water. Taka, is Shinobu here? Why don't you let her? Bang. Her face froze, and the basin slipped from her hands, hitting the ground and splashing water everywhere, soaking her shoes. Lady Ri, I'm back, Aoki called out. Tears streamed down Ri's face. It's so good that you're back. So good. It took her a while to calm down. In the living room, the five of them sat around the table. Taka poured tea for Kane and Shinobu. Ri asked, Aoki, what happened after Taka and I escaped that night? Where have you been this past year? Kane and Shinobu both leaned forward, clearly eager to hear his answer. Aoki fell silent, lost in thought for a moment, before slowly beginning. After you and Taka left that night, I fought the demon that Master had become. I managed to subdue him, but then Muzan Kibutsuji appeared. Takina's hands clenched immediately, and Ri gasped, Muzan Kibutsuji. She had heard this name from Shinobu and knew he was the progenitor of all demons, a monster that had lived for thousands of years, one no one had been able to defeat. She also knew he was the one who had turned Kazuhiko into a demon, the cause of all their family's suffering. Kane and Shinobu exchanged glances, realizing they had narrowly missed encountering Muzan Kibutsuji that night, avoiding a near-certain death. Aoki continued, Kibutsuji Muzan killed the demon that my master had turned into and then forcibly transformed me into a demon as well. Fortunately, my body had undergone certain changes, so I didn't lose my mind. I didn't need to consume humans and could grow stronger by defeating other demons. I wanted to seek revenge against Muzan Kibutsuji, but I feared I would bring danger to Lady Ri and Taka, so I chose to leave, until last night, when I finally defeated Muzan Kibutsuji. Kane and Shinobu were stunned by his story. As demon slayers, they fully grasped how unbelievable Aoki's experiences over the past year had been, and how extraordinary his achievements were. Calling it a legend would not be an exaggeration. However, Ri and Taka, who did not understand the true strength of demons, were more concerned about Aoki's safety after hearing his tale. As evening came, Kane and Shinobu prepared to say their goodbyes. "There were 3 of us when we arrived, and only 2 of us are leaving," Shinobu sighed. Aoki reminded her, "I'll walk you back and then return here, so there will still be 3 of us on the way back." Shinobu replied, "That only makes you our means of transportation." Aoki sighed. "I didn't expect you to be so sharp-tongued." Kane then asked, "Mr. Aomura, is Aoki your real name?" Aoki nodded. "I'm sorry I kept it a secret until now." Kane gave a faint smile and gently shook her head. "It doesn't matter. Mr. Aomura is still Mr. Aomura, regardless of his name." Shinobu chimed in, "When I mentioned that Takina's last name was Aomura, you said something about fate. You changed your name to Aomura just because of Taka, so it would have been strange if it were different. And today?" Aoki quickly interrupted, "There's no time left. Let's set off." That had indeed been a bit of his mischievous side. Shinobu shot Aoki a glare as she and her sister each took hold of one of his arms. In a flash, the 3 of them returned to the butterfly estate. "Alright, I'm heading back now," Aoki said, waving to the 2 of them before leaving again. Taka stood silently at the door. Suddenly, her vision blurred, and when she focused again, Aoki was already standing in the yard. "Aoki, you're back." "Yes," he replied with a smile, walking towards her. In the blink of an eye, half a month had passed. During this time, Aoki did nothing but stay with Taka and his Ri. It was the most leisurely period he had experienced since coming to this world. The cold wind howled outside, rattling the windows. Taka sat at the table, sewing clothes with intense concentration. Across from her, Aoki was curled up under the kotatsu, holding a biographical novel and reading it with mild disinterest. The room was quiet. Ding ding ding. There was a knock at the door, and Taka looked up. "I'll get it." Aoki put down the book, slipped on his shoes, and went outside. As he opened the door, he was momentarily surprised. In the cold wind stood a tall, beautiful girl in a kimono, her demeanor gentle. "Ms. Kane?" he said. Kane smiled. "Aomura, no, Mr. Aoki, long time no see." Aoki stepped aside, gesturing for her to come in. "It hasn't been that long. Did you come here alone?" Kane waved her hand. "I won't come in. I'm here today to inform you of something." "Oh? What is it?" Aoki asked. 3 days from now, the master will hold a meeting of the pillars, and he requests your attendance," she replied. "A meeting of the pillars?" Aoki considered this. "Alright, I'll be there." Kane nodded. "Then I'll take my leave." Aoki was taken aback. "Already? Why are you in such a hurry?" "I was just passing by today. I have other matters to attend to," she explained. It was clear that she wasn't being polite. After a brief greeting, she departed. Taka emerged and watched Kane's retreating figure. "Is that Miss Kane? Why did she leave so quickly?" "It seems she had other things to do." "She just came by to inform me about the meeting," Aoki replied. "Just passing by? What a coincidence, especially on such a cold day." Taka murmured, looking from Kane's slender silhouette back to Aoki. "The clothes are almost ready. Come and try them on," she said. "Alright." 3 days later. At the Demon Slayer Corps headquarters, the normally closed gates stood open. "I always feel a little uneasy," Tengen muttered, scratching his head as he entered. There were already several people gathered in the courtyard. "Am I the last to arrive?" he asked. Sanemi shook his head. "No. There's still one more yet to come." "One more?" Tengen counted quickly. Indeed, there were 8 people present. Who was missing? Then, he realized. Ah, I know who it is. The big shot always makes a grand entrance. As soon as I arrived, I heard someone talking behind my back. Aoki's voice rang out as he appeared. Mr. Aomura, everyone greeted in unison, their faces showing respect. Aoki was momentarily taken aback before joking, let me be clear, if you want to borrow money, I can only lend you 200 at most. Laughter filled the air, lightening the atmosphere. At that moment, Kagaya emerged supported by his 2 children. It's wonderful to see everyone gathered here again, he said. My lord. The pillars knelt on one knee. With a smile, Kagaya addressed them, today marks the last meeting of the Hashira Coordination Committee. I have called you here for one reason, from today onward, the Demon Slayer Corps is officially disbanded. Yes, the pillars responded in unison, emotions written across their faces. They had expected this, but it wasn't a sad moment. The disbanding of the Demon Slayer Corps wasn't due to defeat but because they had achieved their ultimate goal. An era has ended, Aoki thought to himself. Kagaya then turned to Aoki, bowing deeply. Thank you, Mr. Aomura, for helping us realize a dream we'd pursued for thousands of years. Aoki replied, Master Ubuyashiki, you honor me. The pillars also turned to him, showing their gratitude. Aoki waved his hand, feigning annoyance. If you keep this up, I might have to leave. He had come only to bear witness, to be part of this historic moment. Everyone laughed, understanding his sentiment. Chapter 133, Urging Marriage. The cold wind howled, snow fell steadily, and the world was wrapped in a layer of silver. A young girl trudged through the snow and came to a stop. Ahead, in an open space, 2 figures, one large, one small, were fighting fiercely. Their movements were both graceful and dangerous, sending snowflakes flying with every swing, making it hard to look away. Nezuko smiled brightly and waved enthusiastically. Brother! Mr. Aomura. Aoki forced Tanjiro back with a swing of his sword. Let's stop here for today. Tanjiro braced himself with his wooden sword, panting heavily, disbelief showing in his bright red eyes. I didn't expect the Hinokami Kagura could be used in battle like this. Aoki nodded. I've told you before, the Hinokami Kagura holds limitless potential. Tanjiro's face clouded with guilt. Mr. Aomura. Aoki waved his hand, cutting him off. I've said it before, this matter has nothing to do with you. It had been a year since the defeat of Muzan Kabutsuji. Since then, Aoki, with his unique abilities beyond those of an ordinary demon, had been diligently studying the breathing techniques. Over the past year, he had completely mastered the movements and techniques of the Hinokami Kagura, but he still could not initiate the technique properly. And it wasn't just the Hinokami Kagura. He had studied other breathing techniques as well, including the 5 basic forms, wind, water, stone, flame, and thunder, as well as derivative techniques like flower breathing, insect breathing, and love breathing. After Muzan Kabutsuji was defeated, all the secrets of the Demon Slayer Corps had been revealed to him. Unfortunately, he had not been able to master a single one of these techniques, showing no signs of progress. By now, it was almost certain he could not learn any of the breathing techniques. Let's go back, Aoki said, patting Tanjiro on the shoulder and waving to Nezuko. It was already dark when the 3 of them returned to the Kamadu house. Muzan Kabutsuji had died, yet the Kamadu family, who were supposed to have been killed that January, were still alive and well. Aoki greeted Kamadu-ki and said to Tanjiro, I won't be coming by for the next few weeks. Tanjiro gave a sincere smile. Then I wish you a happy new year in advance, Mr. Aomura. In 1 week, it'll be New Year. Happy New Year to you too. Aoki waved goodbye and disappeared into the night. Ri heard the commotion and looked up. You're back, Aoki. Lady Ri, Aoki replied casually, where's Takaina? Shinobu and Kane are here, the 3 of them went out shopping together, Ri answered. Aoki's expression remained unchanged. He found a comfortable spot on the sofa and sat down. This year, Shinobu and Kane had visited often, so he was already used to their presence. Suddenly, Ri put down what she was working on, looked at Aoki seriously, and said, "Aoki, I have something very important to tell you." "Go ahead, Lady Ri." Aoki sat up straighter. "When are you going to marry Taka? Ri asked directly. "Ah?" Aoki was taken aback. Ri frowned. "What's wrong?" "After the new year, Taka will be 18. She's old enough to get married." Aoki remained silent for a moment. "Lady Ri, I am no longer human." "So?" Ri raised an eyebrow. "Do you want Taka to marry someone else?" "Of course not," Aoki replied without hesitation. "Then there's nothing to discuss," Ri said firmly. Aoki fell silent again, then nodded. "I understand. I will give this matter serious thought, Lady Ri." That night, Aoki lay on his bed, pondering Ri's words. Marry? Taka was human, and he was a demon, not just any demon, but the Demon King. This wasn't simply a matter of biological incompatibility. His blood was extremely toxic to Taka. Even the slightest contact with a wound could poison her at best or transform her into a demon at worst. Even if he married Taka, he could only give her a title, there would be no change in any other aspect. After a long while, Aoki sat up. In an instant, his figure vanished from the room. Asakusa. Tamayo was focused on her experiments when a figure materialized in midair. Glancing up briefly, she returned to her work. After half an hour, she finally exhaled and set her equipment aside. Turning to Aoki, she smiled. "Mr. Aoki, you're here." "Thank you for your hard work," Aoki said. Tamayo chuckled. "It's busier during the day." After her clinic officially opened, its reputation spread quickly. Soon, everyone in the neighborhood knew about the young, beautiful, and highly skilled doctor in Asakusa. Because so many people came to see her, she had to expand the clinic, turning it into a small hospital and even recruiting several students. She worked during the day and conducted her research at night. As a demon, she had enough energy to handle it all, and the busy life made her feel fulfilled. Aoki looked at the lab table. "How's the progress?" Tamayo shook her head slightly. "Almost none. The power of demons and their unique characteristics seem to be intrinsically linked, like a fundamental rule. Separation seems impossible. Even analyzing the nature of demon power has shown little progress." She had been conducting similar experiments for a long time. Yashiro was one such result. Aoki had anticipated this and was prepared for a long struggle, but at this moment, he couldn't help but feel a bit of a headache. Demons were immortal, possessed great power, and wielded magical blood arts, making them far more formidable than humans in battle. However, demons also had shortcomings. They could not enjoy delicious food or experience human love. They had neither physical needs nor emotional desires. For demons, it seemed that only spiritual fulfillment was left. Yet the body and mind were closely connected. When the body could not feel desire, how much joy could the spirit truly experience? The full range of human emotions and desires had been lost to demons. Many demons lived so long that they gradually forgot their human memories, becoming creatures driven by simple obsessions like survival or gaining strength. Is the purpose of life merely to exist? This might seem a hypocritical question. Eternal life was a dream that many sought but could never achieve. Yet for demons, it was a necessary consideration. Was it truly meaningful to be immortal, but to possess only a body and a few simple desires? Given the choice between the power of a demon and the body and emotions of a human, which would he choose? Aoki's answer was clear: he wanted both. The research Tamayo was conducting was a step toward that goal. It would not be easy, but he wasn't in a hurry. He felt he had plenty of time to wait for hope to emerge. However, his sudden talk of marriage had stirred an unexpected urgency in him. Chapter 134, New Career, Doctor. Aoki looked at Tamayo again. "So, there's no chance of success in the short term?" Tamayo asked, unsure. Mr. Aoki, what do you mean by short term? Within a year? There is absolutely no chance. Tamayo used 3 strong words to express her certainty. All right, then. Aoki sighed, abandoning the idea of finding a breakthrough with her. What happened? Tamayo asked, curious. In her experience, it was rare to see Mr. Aoki so troubled. Aoki briefly explained how he was being pressured to marry. Tamayo found it amusing, the powerful warrior who had defeated 7 upper-ranked demons and Muzan Kibutsuji himself was worried about getting married. It struck her that Mr. Aoki was not even 20 years old yet, still, in many ways, just a kid. Thinking for a moment, Tamayo said seriously, I think the most important thing is that 2 people are willing to be together. It doesn't necessarily have to involve a physical relationship. As a doctor and a woman over 500 years old, she felt comfortable discussing such matters with him. A platonic relationship? Aoki shook his head. He knew Taka wouldn't reject him, but he wanted to solve the problem completely. Besides, physical desire was only one issue. If left unresolved, more complications could arise over time. Ms. Tamayo, you still have the human transformation potion, right? During the final battle with Muzan Kibutsuji, the potion to turn demons back into humans hadn't been fully developed. It was only completed half a year later, but by then, it was no longer needed, so it remained with Tamayo. Tamayo nodded and took out a small case containing 5 syringes. There are 5 doses in total. They're all here. Aoki said, give them to me. If you have time, please make more. Tamayo handed him the box. Mr. Aoki, do you plan to turn back into a human? I don't have any such plans at the moment. Aoki shook his head. He wanted the transformation potion just in case he needed it one day, but he had no intention of giving up the power he had worked so hard to obtain. Besides, there was the question of whether the potion could even turn him back into a human. In the original story, there were several conditions for Tanjiro to transform back from being a demon king. First, he had consumed Nezuko's blood, which had certain antibodies. Second, he had been a demon for only a short time. Finally, Tanjiro himself had a strong desire to return to his human form. Aoki met none of these conditions. Tamayo remained silent. She was willing to support whatever Mr. Aoki decided to do. For centuries, her primary motivation had been revenge. Now that her revenge was complete, she had no desires left except the desire to repay her debts. Aoki continued, by the way, Ms. Tamayo, I hope you can find a way to help demons regain their human consciousness as soon as possible. It would be even better if you could also solve the issue of their need for human flesh. Tamayo sensed something in his words and was slightly surprised. Mr. Aoki, can you turn people into demons? Aoki nodded. I've inherited nearly all of Muzan Kibutsuji's abilities. He had never revealed this to anyone before. This ability was too sensitive, sharing it would only cause trouble and create unnecessary concern. But Tamayo was one of the very few people he could trust with such information. After a moment's hesitation, Tamayo asked, Mr. Aoki, are you considering turning your loved ones into demons? Aoki nodded calmly. Not right now, but what if one of them falls seriously ill or is on the verge of dying from old age? Shouldn't I be prepared for that possibility? Although becoming a demon means losing a lot, at least you get to survive, and as long as you're alive, there's hope. Alright, I'll make this my priority, Tamayo replied. She fully understood Mr. Aoki's reasoning. After all, she had chosen to become a demon just to be able to watch her children grow up. Unfortunately, she had been deceived by Muzan Kibutsuji. After becoming a demon, she lost her mind and ended up killing her husband and children with her own hands. But Mr. Aoki would never do something like that. With her help, he had managed to regain his sense of self after becoming a demon, no longer needing to consume humans. This was, in a way, the breakthrough he had always dreamed of. If necessary, I can capture some death row prisoners and turn them into demons for you to experiment on, Aoki offered. It was best to entrust this matter to Miss Tamayo. It wasn't appropriate for anyone else, including Kane Kocho, to know about it. Tamayo nodded and did not refuse. After all, materials were essential for research. Death row inmates, she thought, were a group of people who were already condemned to die. If their existence could help Mr. Aoki, they might, in some way, contribute positively. Perhaps they could even be reborn into a better life in their next incarnation. Aoki glanced at the clock on the wall. It's almost dawn. I'll help see the patients today. Isn't it early for you? Tamayo asked, surprised. Aoki laughed at himself. I've realized I've been too lazy lately. I plan to work harder from now on. He grabbed a white coat and put it on. As he did, a deep blue screen appeared in front of him. Name, Aoki. Strength, 28. Constitution, 28. Intelligence, 28. Agility, 28. Occupation, Hunter, King of the White Walkers, Martial Artist, Doctor. King of the Others. Quality. Level, LV20, 0/2000. Skills, Demon Blood 6, Space Shuttle 2, Transparent World 2, Demon Devourer 2, Soul Shock, not learned yet. Doctor. Quality. Level, LV4, 158/400. Skills, Scalpel, Cure all diseases with medicine, Sharp eyes. Aoki looked at his system panel. After studying with Tamayo and Kane for 2 months, he had finally acquired the doctor profession, just as he had hoped. There were 4 skills listed. Scalpel enhanced his surgical talents, and Cure all diseases with medicine improved his skills in medicine preparation and manufacturing. Sharp eyes wasn't the legendary Monkey King's magical power, but rather a skill to boost his diagnostic intuition. None of these skills offered any advantage in combat. To level up as a doctor, he needed to save lives and cure illnesses. However, over the past year, without any real sense of urgency, he had been living more leisurely. 10 months had passed, and he still hadn't reached the maximum level. Of course, another reason was that he had grown accustomed to the rapid level increases as King of the White Walkers and the surge in attribute points, so he was not as focused on his half-star profession as he had been when he first obtained Hunter. He had invested a lot of time in learning breathing techniques and developing his abilities as the King of the White Walkers. Yet, all these efforts had led to failure. He hadn't mastered any breathing techniques and didn't gain any experience points from the King of the White Walkers. The only lesson he learned was that he could not gain any experience from killing newly turned demons. This conclusion had been reached after the lives of 10 death row prisoners were used for testing. Chapter 135, Conditions for Obtaining a Career. In the past year, his only gain in combat was that the doctor profession awarded him an attribute point at level 3, which he added to his physical fitness, curing his obsessive-compulsive disorder. Dr. Aoki. Dr. Aoki, are you seeing patients today? Long time no see, Dr. Aoki. As Aoki walked through the hospital, people constantly greeted him. He had a fairly high status here, not due to his talent or medical skills, but mainly because of his close relationship with the dean, Miss Tamayo. He was the only one who could freely enter and leave her laboratory. Though some accused him of being a gigolo, Aoki didn't mind. Instead, he used his privileges to speed up his experience gain. After a busy day in which he earned 10 experience points, Aoki finished his work as darkness fell. He didn't feel tired but decided to call it a day. First, it was important to behave as much like an ordinary person as possible. Secondly, there were fewer patients at night, so the efficiency of gaining experience was low. After declining an invitation from 2 colleagues to go to the pub, Aoki used space travel to return to Asakusa town. Ri and Taka were already accustomed to his sudden disappearances and reappearances, so they didn't even ask about it. After chatting with Taka and his Ri for a while, Aoki returned to his room and thought over the problem he was facing again. His ultimate goal was to transform back into a human while retaining the powers of a demon. There was no hope of achieving this through research in the short term. Others might have given up, but he still had something to rely on, the system. According to Miss Tamayo, the question of the origin of demon power was too profound, and with the current level of technology, there was no possibility of understanding it. Even after Aoki described to her the potential future developments and changes in the medical field, Miss Tamayo's answer remained a firm no. As for separating the powers and characteristics of demons, it seemed like a fairy tale, completely unrealistic. But with the system, the impossible often became possible. With its help, he overcame his hunger for flesh and grew stronger by killing demons. In just 1 year, his strength had surpassed that of Muzan Kibutsuji. When facing difficulties, turning to the system was just common sense, right? But if he wanted to achieve the goal of having both in a short period, he would need to rely on extraordinary powers. There were only 2 kinds of supernatural powers in this world, and he couldn't master the other breathing method. In other words, if he wanted to solve his problem with the system's power, he would have to go to another world. This is troublesome, Aoki muttered, rubbing his forehead. He was certain that other worlds existed because he himself had come from another world. However, he had no idea where these worlds were or how to reach them. No. It wasn't that there were absolutely no clues, but rather that he had only a vague, uncertain guess. The more Aoki thought about it, the more unreliable it seemed. Even if he could reach another world, how would he return? How long would it take to travel there and back? Would he be able to obtain the power he desired in another world? And what about safety concerns? These were just a few of the issues that crossed his mind. Let's wait and see. Once a decision is made, there's no chance to regret it. This is a good time to accumulate more strength, Aoki decided, suppressing his impulse for the moment. The next day, he continued working as a doctor. 2 months later, Aoki finally accumulated enough experience to reach the maximum level of doctor. It had taken him more than a year in total, the longest time required among his 4 professions. The last skill points he obtained were used to learn the final skill of the doctor profession. He added the remaining free attribute points to his strength, bringing it up to 29 points, just 1 step away from reaching 30. Although he had reached the maximum level for the doctor profession, this did not mean he was already the strongest doctor. The skills of a half-star profession improve one's innate talent, but they do not directly enhance professional ability. Simply put, whether it is a doctor, martial artist, or hunter, the system's professions transform him from an ordinary person into a genius in those fields. To become an expert, however, he still had to learn all the necessary knowledge and skills on his own. The system couldn't help with that. As a doctor, Aoki's level was already quite good, but he was still far inferior to Ms. Tamayo and Kane Kocho. He had the talent to catch up with or even surpass them, but this would require a long period of study. If he had enough time, he wouldn't mind delving into medicine and becoming a great medical expert. However, with a more advanced goal in mind, he naturally didn't intend to waste time on that. In most cases, medical skills or having a nurse's assistance were very important. But as a demon, Aoki had his own regenerative abilities and happened to be one of the few who didn't need them. So, he plunged into his next endeavor, aiming to obtain another profession. This time, he chose to pursue the profession of a chef. Unfortunately, he failed. There was simply no way for him to gain the chef profession. It definitely wasn't the fault of his instructor. Through Ubuyashiki Kagaya, he had found one of the most renowned chefs in Tokyo to teach him. Eventually, Aoki realized that the reason was probably that he couldn't taste flavors. The importance of taste to a chef is self-evident. This also made him realize that his professions could not transcend his basic conditions. For example, after acquiring Muzan Kibutsuji's blood, he obtained the White Walker profession. If he remained human, he would never be able to gain the profession of a demon. In this context, it also made sense that he couldn't master the breathing techniques. These techniques were created based on the human body's structure and were not applicable to demons. In other words, the system simply professionalizes the powers he possesses or can acquire, it cannot create powers out of thin air. Based on this, Aoki next tried to obtain the sprinter profession. He had pursued the chef profession out of interest, but he chose sprinter because he thought it might be helpful in combat. He failed again. Reflecting on his failure, Aoki guessed it was probably because his physical abilities had already surpassed the profession's requirements. If he wanted to, he could easily win any physical competition in the world. He didn't need any help from a profession, he was already the strongest. In addition to being based on physical conditions, acquiring a profession also had to conform to realistic logic. Given his situation, Aoki concluded that to increase his chances of success, it would be best to choose a half-star profession focused more on skills. Looking back, he realized he had narrowly obtained the martial artist profession. Though he spent some time after 2 consecutive failures, he was able to summarize 2 key rules, so it wasn't a complete waste. However, Aoki didn't have time to attempt gaining another profession because the time of year when the sun was at its strongest was fast approaching. Chapter 136, World Travel, Aoki leaves. _________. The colorful flowers formed a vibrant sea, glowing brilliantly under the golden sunlight. It's beautiful, Tamayo sighed, then asked, is the blue spider lily here? That's right, Aoki replied, pointing to the ground beneath them. Amidst the beautiful flowers, a few weeds were growing. Which one is it? Tamayo's face showed confusion. She didn't see any blue flowers. It's this one, Aoki pointed directly to one of the weeds. This is the blue spider lily? Tamayo's mouth opened slightly in disbelief. She had considered this possibility, but found it hard to accept. Muzan Kibutsuji had searched for thousands of years for a treasure that could allow demons to withstand the sun, only for it to turn out to be just a few weeds. Though they look unremarkable, they are indeed blue spider lilies, Aoki explained. The blue spider lily only blooms briefly when the sun is at its peak, and it may not bloom every year due to factors like temperature and climate. Tamayo stared at the blue spider lily for a few moments. It wasn't easy for you to find it, Mr. Aoki. I just took a few shortcuts, Aoki replied with a shake of his head. Without activating his third eye, finding the blue spider lily would have been extremely difficult. Tamayo held down her skirt with one hand and steadied her sun hat with the other as she squatted down. Hopefully, it will bloom this year. It didn't bloom last year, but there's still hope for this year, Aoki said. He wasn't sure of the exact conditions needed for the blue spider lily to grow and bloom, but he knew one thing for certain, it required intense sunlight. In the Kumatori mountain area, it had been sunny for half a month straight. Tamayo carefully began collecting data. Naturally, she also wanted to overcome the sun's effects so she could walk in daylight without fear. Aoki moved to a nearby open area and stretched out his hand. Bang! With a loud noise, a large sofa appeared. Startled by the sound, Tamayo turned to look and was taken aback. What is this? A sofa, Aoki smiled, patting the seat beside him. Miss Tamayo, please sit down. We may have to wait several days. While the blooming time of the blue spider lily is short, it's not just a matter of a few minutes or seconds. We don't need to stare at it all the time. As he spoke, he took out a gourd filled with demon wine and a small table. Smiling, he said, just in time, this batch of demon wine is ready. Let's drink while we wait. Tamayo walked over, sat down next to him, and asked, curiously, Mr. Aoki, where were you hiding this big thing before? She thought about it and realized that Aoki had previously pulled out items unexpectedly, but they had never been this large or caused such a commotion. Do you know about the Infinity Castle? Aoki asked. Tamayo nodded. Yes, it's an alternate dimension that was once controlled by Muzan Kibutsuji. Aoki explained, I have a similar space, though it's a bit smaller. But it's still more than enough to store some everyday items. Would you like to take a look inside, Miss Tamayo? Tempted, Tamayo hesitated but ultimately declined. Let's focus on getting the blue spider lily first. Alright, Aoki agreed, not pressing the matter. He poured 2 glasses of the wine, and a unique aroma filled the air. Tamayo's curiosity deepened. "What kind of wine is this?" "Champagne, a foreign wine," Aoki answered. "I specifically asked the head of the Ubuyashiki family to get it for me." The Ubuyashiki family wielded great influence and had significant business connections in the outside world. Incidentally, Aoki had also visited a shrine with the help of the Ubuyashiki clan to see if it could help him obtain a new profession. When the Ubuyashiki clan was on the brink of extinction, a god had guided them to form the Demon Slayer Corps, which ultimately preserved their bloodline. And that method had indeed proven effective. After Muzan Kibutsuji's death, the Ubuyashiki clan's curse was lifted. In the original story, Ubuyashiki Kagaya's son, Ubuyashiki Kariya, even went on to become one of the longest-living people. In this timeline, after Muzan Kibutsuji's death, the curse on Ubuyashiki Kagaya also disappeared. While the injuries he had already sustained were not directly healed, they no longer worsened. With the treatment provided by Ms. Tamayo and Kane Kocho, his health condition improved significantly. According to Ms. Tamayo, the changes after the curse's removal were more substantial than she had anticipated. As long as nothing unexpected occurred, Ubuyashiki Kagaya should have no problem living past the age of 40. Additionally, the Ubuyashiki clan had always married women from priestly families, which made their offspring less likely to die young. All these facts suggested that the priestly family was not simple, and the head priest was particularly exceptional. There seemed to be a connection to the supernatural. Alongside pursuing extraordinary careers, Aoki also wanted to explore whether gods existed in this world through the priestly family. However, the head priest flatly rejected his request. It wasn't out of selfishness. As he explained, it wasn't that they could communicate with the gods, rather, the gods chose them. In simple terms, they could not decide who could communicate with the gods. The priests were selected directly by the gods through a ceremony when they were young. Aoki even observed one of these selection ceremonies. Unfortunately, he learned nothing from it. Based on his observations, there seemed to be no self-aware gods, but perhaps something resembling a global consciousness. Sadly, he couldn't make contact with it. After repeated attempts without any results, he finally decided to give up. Time passed slowly, and 2 days went by in the blink of an eye. Aoki sat on the sofa, flipping through a medical book, while Tamayo was bent over a table, writing and drawing, recording numerous modern medical terms in her notebook. Despite having lived for hundreds of years, she was neither unfamiliar with new concepts nor resistant to them. She actively sought to learn and update her knowledge base. As Aoki finished reading a page, he turned it and glanced up. Among the flowers, those weeds had suddenly disappeared, replaced by several brilliant blue flowers, stretching their beautiful petals to their fullest. Crash! Aoki jumped up suddenly. "Ms. Tamayo." Tamayo reacted immediately, turning her head. When she saw the stunning blue flowers, she gasped softly. The blue spider lily. She had seen pictures and had even seen the artificial flowers Aoki made when they were hunting Muzan Kibutsuji. Visually, they were identical. "We finally found it." The two exchanged smiles. "We're fortunate," Tamayo's eyes sparkled. As an excellent doctor, she was very intrigued by unknown medicinal herbs. The blue spider lily, a magical plant that could help demons overcome sunlight, had always been one of her most desired subjects of study. "Ms. Tamayo, go ahead and pick them," Aoki said. Tamayo nodded, stood up, and carefully picked several flowers, placing them into a pre-prepared medicine box. After collecting the blue spider lilies, the two returned to the laboratory without delay. Fortunately, Tamayo had studied the notes about the blue spider lily left by the doctor who had helped Muzan Kibutsuji become a demon. These notes were shown to her by Muzan Kibutsuji while he was still controlling her, so she could research a drug to overcome the effects of sunlight. With this guidance and reference, Tamayo made rapid progress in creating the potion. Aoki couldn't be of much help and might even interfere with her efforts, so he returned to Asakusa town. Taka and his master's wife were not at home. He sat alone in the yard and, on a sudden impulse, activated the system. The conditions are right, it's time to make a decision. You can choose any skill and strengthen it to the extreme. He had never used this reward from the road to the Demon King. Strengthening demon blood would allow him to transform again, while strengthening demon devouring might break his current dilemma of being unable to gain experience. Strengthening transparent world would likely enhance his perception capabilities. Aoki traveled through space. He had obtained a stronger profession, but he couldn't level up because there were no sufficiently powerful monsters. The current levels of science, technology, and extraordinary power are highly insufficient, making it impossible to fully explore the nature of power. The other three skills are all impressive and powerful in their own ways, but Space Shuttle is the only one with the potential to break through the predicament he faces. Alright, system, show me your power. Aoki made his choice without hesitation. He chose to maximize the enhancement of Space Shuttle. He had hesitated countless times before, but this time he had already decided before opening the system. A cool sensation spread through his body and quickly vanished, leaving only a message and. Aoki raised his left hand, and a silver flower began to take shape. The flower had 9 petals, but only one was solid while the others remained ethereal. Is this the ultimate enhanced space shuttle? Aoki silently contemplated it, his eyes growing brighter and brighter. It was just as he had suspected, or perhaps even more perfect than he had imagined. Space Shuttle was his blood demon art, born from his obsession with traveling through time. At level 1, he could only teleport within his line of sight. At level 2, he gained the ability to teleport anywhere in the world. But that still wasn't true time travel. If he could enhance it once more, could he reach the point where he could travel between worlds? This was the only chance he could think of to achieve interdimensional travel. He had made the right bet. After Space Shuttle was enhanced to its limit, it gained the ability called World Shuttle, represented by the silver flower on the back of his left hand. Each petal of the flower could record the coordinates of one world. The coordinates of the Demon Slayer world were automatically recorded, which was why only one petal was real while the others were virtual. The silver flower could also store energy. Once fully charged, it could enable travel between worlds. There were 2 forms, one allowed travel to a world whose coordinates were recorded in the petals, while the other enabled random travel based on the connections between worlds. After traveling to another world, the energy in the silver flower would be depleted and would need time to recharge. As for the charging time, it was undecided. The speed of recharging varied depending on each world. Level 1 was Space Shuttle, Level 2 was Space Coordinate Shuttle, and Level 3 was finally the true World Shuttle. Aoki looked at the silver flower on the back of his hand. At that moment, the silver flower was fully charged and ready for World Shuttle. However, to truly travel through time and space, there was one more thing to do, finding the extreme point of the world's crystal wall. Based on the information he received from World Shuttle, each world was surrounded by a crystal wall, isolating time and space, blocking cause and effect, making it almost impossible to cross. But there were always exceptions. There was actually a tiny hole in the otherwise indestructible crystal wall that no one could cross, known as the pole. Only at the pole could one travel between worlds. However, the poles were very small and shifted over time. Aoki turned his head and looked northwest. Although the exact coordinates of the pole weren't provided, when the silver flower was fully charged, it gave a sense of the pole's general location, greatly reducing the difficulty of finding it. The current polar coordinates in the Demon Slayer world were located to the west. After a brief hesitation, Aoki activated Space Coordinate Shuttle and instantly arrived at a field of flowers. He and Ms. Tamayo had just left this place. It's a coincidence that the pole is actually here. Through the silver flower on the back of Aoki's left hand, he could clearly feel he was standing at the pole, ready to activate the World Shuttle and leave at any time. Yurichi Tsujikuni's wife was buried here, the blue spider lily was here, Tanjiro's family lived nearby, and now, the pole was here as well. This truly was a place chosen by destiny. Everything is ready, only the final piece is missing. Aoki looked in the direction of Asakusa. A week later. Aoki and Taka were enjoying the cool breeze in the yard. Suddenly, a strange sensation surged in his mind. Before he could say anything to Taka, Aoki's figure suddenly disappeared. Taka glanced over, but quickly returned to her own tasks. Meanwhile, Aoki found himself in Miss Tamayo's laboratory. I must have activated the space coordinates directly. Miss Tamayo, what happened? He trailed off, before finishing his sentence. Miss Tamayo was standing in front of a laboratory bench, where a medicine box rested. It was filled with crushed ice, emitting a cold mist. 10 blue potions lay silently on the ice. Is that the blue spider lily? Aoki asked. The blue spider lily was both the name of a flower and a medicine. Tamayo nodded slightly. Yes, this is the blue spider lily, but I'm not sure if it will help demons overcome the sun. Aoki suggested, let's find a demon to test it on. No. Tamayo shook her head. I'll try it myself. Wait a moment. Aoki quickly interjected. We don't know if there might be any side effects yet. Why not test it on a death row inmate first? Tamayo smiled softly. This potion is too precious to waste. Besides, I've studied the production process thousands of times. At most, it won't work. There shouldn't be any harm. Given a demon's unique physiology, there was little risk of side effects unless it caused instant poisoning. Aoki sighed and said, then why not let Yashiro try it first? Tamayo gave him a reproachful glance, rolled up her sleeve to reveal her slender, pale wrist, and picked up a syringe, injecting herself without hesitation. Swish! The blue potion quickly disappeared into her veins. Miss Tamayo's wrist remained smooth and white, unchanged. Aoki watched her nervously. Miss Tamayo, how do you feel? Very well. Tamayo replied, looking momentarily dazed before quickly regaining her composure. It feels like my body has undergone a transformation. Aoki glanced at the clock on the wall. The hands pointed directly at 12. It was exactly noon. Let's go outside and test it. Aoki suggested. The injection was the most dangerous stage, but the test was less risky. Even if Tamayo couldn't endure the sunlight, he could bring her back to safety immediately. Tamayo nodded with a hint of excitement. They hurried outside, not noticing when someone greeted them. When they reached the door, Tamayo grabbed the handle with both hands, but paused. Aoki didn't push her, waiting silently. After only 2 seconds, Tamayo suddenly opened the door. The blazing sun of August noon, the most feared time for demons, shone down upon her. But at that moment, there was no fear in Tamayo's heart. Instead, a warm sensation spread from her skin to her core. Aoki watched as Miss Tamayo stood safely in the sunlight, a smile forming on his face. Miss Tamayo turned around. Congratulations, Ms. Tamayo, Aoki said warmly. Tamayo smiled back. Thank you, Mr. Aoki. A great experiment ended just like that, without even a third person witnessing it. After returning to the laboratory, Aoki took 3 of the blue spider lily potions, leaving 6 behind. Tamayo looked puzzled. Mr. Aoki, just keep one for Yashiro. What about the others? Aoki interrupted her, I have a very important request, Miss Tamayo. Seeing his serious expression, Tamayo replied earnestly, Mr. Aoki, please tell me. As long as it's within my ability, I will not refuse. Aoki took out a bottle filled with blood. This is my blood. I want you to keep it safe, Miss Tamayo. If things get dire, I hope you can use it to turn some people into demons. Although his world travel ability was flawless, he wasn't certain when he'd be able to return. This bottle of blood was his insurance. Even if something went wrong, he hoped his loved ones wouldn't turn into mere bones in a grave by the time he came back. Tamayo's beautiful face showed concern. Mr. Aoki, why not handle this yourself? Aoki did not hold back. I have to go on a long journey soon and may not return in time. Tamayo was stunned. Mr. Aoki's relatives and friends were mostly in their 20s, which meant they had several decades left to live. Yet, he was worried they might not be able to wait for his return. What kind of journey would take decades? Aoki said, I can only rely on you for this, Miss Tamayo. I understand. Though worried, Tamayo agreed, put away the blue spider lily potions, and said firmly, I promise that when you return, all your loved ones will still be alive and well. Aoki smiled. Don't stress yourself, Miss Tamayo. This is just a precaution. Traveling between worlds had its dangers, but he had anticipated them, and it was within his tolerance. Meanwhile, in Igura, at a restaurant, Mitsuri Kenroji, the chef, was busy and dressed in her uniform. A steady stream of diners filled the place, and praises could be heard in every corner. Every compliment fueled her motivation. Although she didn't have the stamina of a demon, her unique physique and breathing techniques gave her endurance beyond that of most humans. As dusk settled and the day wound down, Mitsuri finally found a moment of rest just as the shop was about to close. At that moment, footsteps were heard. Sorry, sir, today's ingredients are. Mr. Aoki. Mitsuri sat up with a surprised expression. Aoki chuckled, looks like business is doing well. Mitsuri flushed slightly as she brushed a strand of hair back, smiling. He, yes, thankfully everyone seems to enjoy it. Is it hard? It's hard, but it's also fun. That's the spirit. Suddenly, Mitsuri jumped up and hurried off. A moment later, she returned with a plate of sakura mochi. Mr. Aoki, please try this. It's my special sakura cake. Aoki did not refuse and picked up a piece to taste. Still feels like sand. Mitsuri's expectant expression fell, but before Aoki could say anything to comfort her, her enthusiasm returned. It doesn't matter. If I fail this time, I'll just keep trying. I'm determined to make food that demons can eat. After closing the shop, they walked side by side to Mitsuri's house. Mitsuri eagerly recounted her experience of preparing to open the restaurant and only stopped when they reached her doorstep. Mr. Aoki, please come earlier next time. I will. Aoki waved, watching Mitsuri enter her home before turning to leave. At the butterfly house, Kane Kocho yawned. Ever since she had stopped hunting demons, life had become too leisurely for her. She felt her body growing sluggish and had even overslept that morning. As she stepped outside, she immediately noticed that under the cherry tree named Must Victory in the yard, Kaneo was fighting fiercely with a young man. With a hint of surprise in her eyes, Kane quickened her pace and walked over. Mr. Aoki. Aoki stopped what he was doing and greeted her. Ms. Kane. Kaneo's eyes were wide, and her breathing was a little rapid. Kane gently ruffled her hair and smiled. No need to fight demons anymore. I haven't asked Kaneo to practice lately, but she doesn't seem to be slacking off. Aoki considered for a moment. Becoming stronger is never a bad thing, but I could also find something else for Kaneo to do. Kane nodded slightly. At that moment, Shinobu Kocho entered from outside. Sister, I bought, eh? She stopped short, noticing Aoki. Long time no see. Aoki waved. Shinobu glanced at him and said, How can you say that? I just saw you at your house 3 days ago. Is that so? A smile appeared on Aoki's face. He stayed at the butterfly house until evening before returning to Asakusa. As he arrived, a figure in the yard caught his eye. Taka, who was washing clothes, looked up. Aoki, you're back. Aoki looked at Taka. The 18-year-old had completely shed her childishness. Now she had bright eyes, white teeth, and a graceful figure. Taka, where is Lady Ri? Ri stepped out of the room. What's the matter, Aoki? I have something to say, Aoki began, then paused. I'm going to be gone for a while. Ri and Takina's expressions changed slightly. They sensed that this time was different from his usual trips. Before they could speak, Aoki continued, I plan to solve my problem. It may take some time. Ri looked slightly lost. Taka, however, asked seriously, is there any danger? There is some danger, but it's manageable, Aoki admitted. However, if something unexpected happens, I might be delayed for a long time. The charging time of the silver flower was his biggest concern. Taka responded calmly, it's okay. I'll always wait for you to come back. Aoki looked at them and said, Lady Ri, Taka, if I'm gone too long, you can go to Asakusa to find Miss Tamayo. Ask her to help you become demons. Become a demon? Aomura Ri was shocked. Taka nodded without hesitation. All right. Aoki smiled. It probably won't come to that. It's just a precaution. That night, he carefully explained the demon matter and his plan to Taka and Ri. Of course, he didn't mention that he was leaving this world. After hearing this, Aomura Ri, who had been a little overwhelmed, seemed to calm down. Aoki didn't leave immediately but stayed with Taka and Ri for another week. 7 days later, before dawn, he quietly slipped out before they woke up. Looking back, Aoki activated the space shuttle and instantly crossed the sky and earth, arriving at Kumatori Mountain. The pole had not shifted yet. Aoki raised his left hand, feeling a little restless. Life over the past year had been leisurely, but also a bit dull. He had to admit that he still preferred a life with twists and turns. Even without the current difficulties, he might have made this decision eventually. Let's get started. Aoki's mind focused, the silver flower on the back of his left hand glowed slightly, and his figure disappeared silently. Chapter 137, Is Death. ___________________. Snowflakes flew through the air, and the cold wind cut like a knife. On the flat ground, the ice and snow had been cleared away, and the tents were neatly arranged. The camp was filled with an iron-blooded atmosphere, so much so that even the most dangerous creatures did not dare to approach. Boom! A loud noise suddenly erupted from the camp. A tent was torn to shreds, snowflakes exploded in all directions, and a figure was thrown out. Is it this exciting already, right after arriving? Aoki murmured, watching the swirling snowflakes. Whoosh! A cold mist rolled in, and a woman burst out from the snow. She had long blue hair, delicate and perfect features, and skin as fair and clear as crystal. Wearing a white officer's uniform, she made no attempt to hide her powerful aura. How dare you break into my tent? You've got some nerve. This really was an accident. Aoki protested, a hint of helplessness on his face. Traveling through worlds means entering from and exiting at an extreme point. The extreme point could appear anywhere, and it just so happened to be inside this woman's tent. Who could he complain to about that? In truth, at this moment, he felt more amused than angry. World travel and space travel are completely different. Using space shuttle felt like diving into water and then emerging again. World shuttle, on the other hand, was like diving into a body of water, but instead of a calm surface, it was a terrifying whirlpool that swallowed and tore everything apart. It was filled with forces beyond imagination or understanding. At first, Aoki thought he was done for. Faced with such violent force, he felt like less than an ant, any slight contact would have torn him to shreds. His regenerative ability, which he had always relied on, seemed useless. However, what happened next was completely unexpected. The power of the silver flower on the back of his hand pulled him along, allowing him to float downstream through the vortex. Though it seemed chaotic, in truth, he was as steady as a seasoned traveler and emerged unscathed. He didn't know how long he had been drifting, but suddenly he came across an exit. Before he could react, he was flung out and landed in the woman's tent. Though he hadn't stumbled upon a scene like someone changing clothes or bathing, the fierce woman attacked him without hesitation, leaving him no chance to explain. Once I catch you and torture you, we'll see if it was an accident or not. The blue-haired woman had a fanatical smile on her face as an icicle materialized beneath her feet, pushing her swiftly towards Aoki. Superpowers? Magic? Or something else? Aoki thought, intrigued. To encounter a supernatural being so soon after arriving in this world, his decision to travel had certainly been the right one. More importantly, this woman was strong. Whoosh! With a flash of cold silver light, the sword pierced through Aoki's heart from a tricky angle, penetrating his body and splattering blood. Aoki countered with a backhand punch aimed at the blue-haired woman's face. The ice condensed instantly, forming a solid shield. Boom! Aoki's fist struck the ice shield, but it remained unscathed. The blue-haired woman's eyes flashed with surprise as she swung her sword again. Aoki dodged, but an ice blade flew past, severing his right arm below the shoulder. Crash! A pair of massive black bat wings unfurled from his back, and Aoki shot into the sky, putting distance between himself and the blue-haired woman. Phew! Even stronger than I expected. There was a mix of seriousness and excitement in his eyes as his severed arm instantly regenerated. The smile on the blue-haired woman's face grew even more excited, like a hunter spotting exceptional prey. Is that your taigu? It feels a bit strange. Also, I recall there being winged taigu, but they didn't look like this. Imperial tool? Aoki was momentarily stunned, and the figure of the blue-haired woman quickly became familiar. Could it be you, Isdef? That's right. Isdef replied, her gaze fixed on Aoki with growing excitement. So, what is your purpose? Are you here to kill me? I told you, it's really just a coincidence. Aoki felt both relieved and slightly regretful. Isdef, Imperial tool, then this must be the world of Akame Kill. He had initially thought that people of this strength were common here, but he hadn't expected to encounter the strongest one right away. Isdef, the blue-haired woman standing before him, was arguably the most formidable being in this world. This had both advantages and disadvantages. The advantage was that his safety was somewhat assured. For now, even though Isdef was incredibly powerful, she couldn't completely restrain him. If even she couldn't capture him, there wasn't much to worry about from others. The disadvantage, however, was that if the level of power in this world was limited, the chances of solving his dilemma were reduced. Additionally, the unique powers of this world mainly revolved around Imperial tools, which were specialized weapons. I'll determine for myself if it was a coincidence or not. Isdef declared with a manic grin, snapping her fingers. The sky suddenly darkened. Aoki looked up to see a massive block of ice, as large as a hill, forming above his head before crashing down with a thunderous bang. At the same time, a path of ice appeared in the air. Isdef stepped onto it, quickly closing the distance between them. Aoki flapped his wings and dodged to the side. Isdef waved her arms, and countless ice spikes materialized around her. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The ice spikes shot toward Aoki, piercing his body with holes, but the next moment, all the wounds healed. Incredible regenerative ability. Is that also the power of an Imperial tool? Isdef wondered aloud. She suddenly leaped up, flipped over, and slashed down with her sword from above. Aoki's figure vanished silently. A platform of ice appeared under Isdef's feet, supporting her body. She turned to look at Aoki, who had reappeared not far away, her eyes gleaming with excitement. Another ability. I'm getting more and more curious. Are you some kind of humanoid dangerous species? No, ordinary dangerous species don't have such regenerative powers. She chuckled. He, with your physique, it must be very entertaining to torture you. Aoki flapped his wings and shot into the sky. Isdef halted her attack, a slightly disappointed look in her eyes. Isdef, we'll meet again. Aoki called out, flapping his wings as he quickly flew away. Arriving in this world and immediately meeting its strongest person. Not ideal. Better to make a strategic retreat for now. Isdef slowly descended to the ground. Several figures immediately surrounded her, their eyes filled with fanaticism and respect. General, who was that just now? Was he an assassin sent by the northern alien tribes? Idiot. What assassin would dare to attack the general? I think he's more likely a spy. A spy? What kind of spy could make it to the center of our camp? They all began discussing at once. Isdeth didn't join in. She was still replaying the recent battle in her mind, a smile lingering on her face. What an interesting prey. I have a feeling we'll meet again. Chapter 138, Imperial Tool. After confirming that Isdeth was no longer in sight, Aoki slowed his flying speed and looked down. The world below was completely covered in ice and snow, desolate, cold, and harsh. He gazed into the distance and finally spotted two small villages far away. Finding a path that could barely be called a road, Aoki descended. After landing, he looked back in the direction he came from. What a crazy woman, he muttered. Isdeth was a very complicated person. She possessed an exceptional talent for commanding troops, and the army she led was considered the strongest in the empire. Combined with her formidable personal strength, she was nearly invincible. Isdeth was very generous to her subordinates and the common people. She often distributed the gold, silver, and treasures awarded to her by the emperor among her soldiers, and she forbade them from harassing the commoners or accepting bribes. She had repelled numerous invasions by foreign tribes, earned great military honors, and could be called a national hero. In fact, Isdeth had a large number of admirers within the empire. However, she also adhered to the law of the jungle, where the strong prey on the weak. She loved war and killing, believed that strength was justice, lacked sympathy or mercy, and relished torture and interrogation. She was strong, domineering, and cold-blooded. It was impossible to judge Isdeth by ordinary moral standards. Perhaps it was more accurate to see her as a weapon rather than a human being. Isdeth was a sharp, bloodthirsty demon blade that could save lives and expand territories, but if mishandled, it could also cause self-harm. By the way, Isdeth is a super sadistic ace, Aoki recalled. I remember reading somewhere that every ace has a hidden love in their heart. If you're strong enough, could you train Isdeth to be? Aoki abruptly stopped that dangerous train of thought. Don't think about such messy things, he chastised himself. I don't have the ability anyway. Aoki turned his mind away from Isdeth and began to consider the current state of the world. Isdeth's presence meant that the empire had not yet fallen apart. The empire was the most powerful country in the world, with a history spanning more than 1,000 years. Now, under the minister's leadership, the entire empire had become corrupt, dark, cruel, and bloody, teetering rapidly on the brink of collapse. It was worth noting that Isdeth was an ally of the minister. Isdeth used the minister's influence to create opportunities for battle, while the minister relied on Isdeth's strength to maintain his control. In this world, there existed a special class of weapons called taigu. To secure long-term rule, the founding emperor of the empire had mobilized the entire country to use materials from super-dangerous species, rare metals like orichalcum steel, and numerous lost secret techniques to create 48 unique weapons that could never be replicated. These were the imperial tools, taigu. However, in a war hundreds of years ago, some of these tools were lost and ended up among the people, shaking the empire's control. At this time, the minister had control over the young emperor and the government. The situation had completely collapsed, and rebellions broke out everywhere. Aoki wasn't concerned with the empire's problems, but he was very interested in the imperial tools. He raised his left hand, noticing the silver flower on the back of it had become very dim. The energy stored in it was depleted, and he had no idea how long it would take to recharge. Maybe I should use this time to collect a few imperial tools? When Aoki thought of the imperial tools, the first ones that came to mind were Incursio and Demon's Extract. Tatsumi had inherited his imperial tool from Bullet. Made from the muscles of the extremely dangerous tyrant, it had exceptional defensive capabilities and could greatly enhance physical abilities. Additionally, there is Isdeth's Demon's Extract, the essence of the devil, Akame's one-hit kill ability, the demon sword Murasame, and so on. The essence of the devil has been absorbed by Isdeth. Even if I were to kill her, I would most likely end up destroyed along with her. Being haunted by demons isn't a bad alternative, Aoki thought as his expression shifted and he considered another Imperial tool. The first and most powerful Imperial tool, inherited by the Imperial royal family, is the nation's Imperial guardian, Shikudazur. This tool can only be wielded by those of royal blood. The young emperor, with no experience using the weapon, could easily destroy an entire city block with a single strike. A few random attacks could threaten the entire Imperial capital with collapse. Aoki silently contemplated his next move. Since he had come to this world, even if he couldn't solve all its problems, he had to make good use of the resources available here. He might be invincible in the Demon Slayer world, but that may not be the case in other worlds. If you want to do your work well, you must first sharpen your tools, he mused. Without sufficient strength, even if I find an opportunity to escape this predicament, I might not be able to seize it. The initial excitement of world travel had gradually faded, and Aoki's thoughts became clearer. Two things are most important, he concluded. One is to level up, and the other is to try to obtain an Imperial tool. The people in this world are incredibly strong. Perhaps this environment could support the continued upgrading of the King of the White Walkers. However, this would require some experimentation. An Imperial tool could also solve his problem of lacking attack power. As a demon, he possessed a strong regenerative ability, and with his space-traveling skills and bat wings, his survival capabilities were impressive. However, his destructive power was severely lacking. Acquiring a suitable Imperial tool would greatly increase his strength. However, wielding an Imperial tool was not so simple. Each Imperial tool required compatibility. If the compatibility did not match, it couldn't be used, even forcibly. Moreover, the compatibility for each tool varied. Some Imperial tools had been shelved for years because no one met their requirements. After thinking it over, I feel the most suitable one for me is the Shikudazur, Aoki said to himself. First and foremost, always aim for the best. Imperial tools like the crosstail were simply not on the same level as the Shikudazur in terms of destructive power. Secondly, the requirement for using the Shikudazur was very clear: royal bloodline. For most, this was an unattainable goal. But Aoki could give it a try. He immediately thought of two possible approaches. The first was to rely on his complete mimicry ability to simulate the bloodline of royal family members. He wasn't sure if he could do it, though, since he didn't know how the Shikudazur detected bloodlines. The second way was to turn the young emperor into a demon and then consume him. However, if he became a demon, the royal bloodline might be destroyed. Let's head to the Imperial capital first, Aoki decided, putting these thoughts aside. The Imperial capital was a hub of intrigue and the best place to obtain Imperial tools. The primary goal was the Shikudazur. But if the chance arose, he could also try to collect other Imperial tools. Since Imperial tools had great burdens and consumed a lot of energy, normally, a person could only wield one. However, Aoki was not afraid of being hurt, so he might be able to handle more than one. With his direction set, Aoki moved quickly. His immediate target was not the Imperial capital, but a village he had seen earlier. He didn't even know the direction to the Imperial capital. He would have to ask someone for directions first. Chapter 139, A Dangerous World. ___________________. Aoki moved forward against the wind and snow. The temperature was extremely low, but it had little effect on him. His body healed instantly from any damage, with no discomfort at all. Continuous damage posed no threat to demons, what they feared was sudden, massive damage. He could now regenerate almost infinitely, but the speed of his regeneration was limited. If someone could destroy him faster than he could heal, he would still die. Infinite regeneration was indeed powerful, but it wasn't true immortality, nor was it invincibility. As he got closer to the village, Aoki felt that something was wrong. It was too quiet. There was no sound except for the wind. The village had no clear layout, with houses clustered together in a chaotic manner. Aoki walked down the street, his expression darkening. The street was buried under a thick layer of snow. Most of the houses on either side had their doors open, but there was no one in sight. Not a single person in the entire village. Large black stains dotted the walls, and Aoki could tell at a glance they were dried blood. All the houses showed signs of being smashed and damaged. Whatever had happened here, it was clear the residents hadn't met a good end. Let's try the other village. Aoki spread his wings, soared into the sky, and flew in another direction. At that moment, a strong wind blew from above, and the sky suddenly darkened. Aoki turned his head to look. A terrifying giant bird came into view. Its wingspan was over 10 meters long, its head resembling a crocodile's but lined with rows of sharp teeth. Its yellow eyes were devoid of any emotion, filled only with the cruelty and bloodthirstiness of a predator. Aoki's figure flickered and disappeared. The giant bird swept past where he had just been, missing him, a hint of confusion in its eyes. Aoki reappeared on the creature's back. Splat! Blood spurted from its head. The giant bird let out a shrill scream and struggled frantically as Aoki vanished again. The bird flapped its wings, desperate to escape. Then, Aoki appeared on its back once more. A burst of blood erupted from the same spot on its head, and his hand plunged deep into its skull. This time, the creature didn't even struggle. Its body stiffened, its wings went limp, and it fell like a meteor. Boom! A massive crater formed upon impact, and the giant bird's corpse lay motionless in the center. Aoki materialized nearby, gazing up at the corpse with surprise in his eyes. It was the first time he had seen such a large bird. With its wings spread wide, it was over 10 meters long, resembling a small fighter jet. Is this a dangerous species? I wonder what level it is. Aoki gently stroked the giant bird's body. Its golden feathers seemed metallic, hard, and sharp-edged. Dangerous species, danger beast, were another distinct feature of this world. They were all formidable monsters. The strongest among them were incredibly terrifying, like forces of nature themselves. Aoki grabbed the giant bird's head, and with a thought, he entered a special space. Compared to before, his alternate space had undergone a massive transformation. Its length, width, and height had all increased 100-fold, becoming a vast realm over 1,000 meters in size. It was larger than the original Infinity Castle. This was the result of extreme enhancement. While spatial travel and spatial mark travel had not changed, the alternate space had expanded significantly, which was an unexpected surprise. Unlike Infinity Castle, this massive space only had a single house in the center, the rest was an empty expanse. The previous space had been taken directly from Infinity Castle. This time, the expansion was based on the original space, so no additional buildings were included. Boom! The enormous corpse fell with a dull thud. Only objects he could physically lift could be brought into the alternate space, and the same rules applied to taking them out. Fortunately, the giant bird wasn't beyond his strength. After storing it, Aoki left the alternate space and resumed his flight toward another village. But this time, as soon as he took to the sky, he was targeted by a flock of strange, crow-like birds. Each one was as large as a basketball, with one that appeared to be the Crow King, as big as a millstone. The eyes of these bizarre crows were bloodshot, brimming with a thirst for blood. In a one-on-one fight, Aoki had no fear, but with hundreds, maybe thousands of these creatures, they were more troublesome than the giant bird he had just defeated. The crow monsters hesitated for a moment before deciding not to attack Aoki. Under the Crow King's lead, they continued to fly north. What a dangerous world, Aoki muttered, shaking his head. He resolved to keep a low profile. The giant birds Aoki had encountered earlier were easily dealt with, so it wouldn't be too hard to handle this flock of strange crows either. But who knew if more troublesome monsters might appear? Fortunately, no further incidents occurred. Aoki landed in an open area outside the village and began walking toward it. This village was very similar in scale and size to the abandoned one. At least there are still people living here, Aoki thought. He looked around and saw that most of the villagers were pale, thin, with dull eyes, and dressed in tattered clothes. "Hello," he called out, stopping a middle-aged man passing by. But as soon as he spoke, the man quickly dodged away, casting a wary glance at him before hurrying off. Aoki noticed this wasn't an isolated reaction. Most of the villagers looked at him with suspicion. Just then, a tall, strong young man dressed in animal skins approached Aoki. "I'm sorry," the young man said. "There were robbers in the village yesterday, and everyone is on edge." Aoki sized him up and thought, what a strong physique. In this world, humans seemed physically stronger than those in the Demon Slayer world. In terms of raw strength, even a pillar might not match this young man. "I don't intend to stay here long. I just want to know where I am and how I can get to the Imperial capital," Aoki replied. The young man in animal skin spoke seriously. "Reaching the Imperial capital won't be easy. This is the northern border of the Empire, only a few dozen kilometers from the fortress of the northern foreign tribes. The capital is thousands of miles away, and there are countless nests of dangerous species along the way." "Foreign tribes from the north?" Aoki mused. He recalled that 3 major alien races surrounded the Empire, one in the south, one in the north, and one in the west. The east was considered a barbarian land. The Empire had been at war with these 3 races for many years. Isdeath was likely here to attack the northern foreign tribes. Aoki now had a rough idea of the timeline. "What is the current situation?" he asked. The young man in animal skins looked grim. "It's terrible. Under the leadership of the brave new Masika, the northern tribes are growing stronger. Most of the nearby villages have already relocated. If this continues, we'll have to leave too." Relocating wasn't easy. For the poor, a house was often their most valuable asset. Leaving their home could mean living on the streets. In such cold weather, having no shelter from the elements was almost like signing a death warrant. And there were countless dangers on the road. Any accident could spell disaster for an entire family. "I don't think you need to move. Isdeath is already here," Aoki said. The so-called northern hero might have some abilities, but he was nothing in front of Isdeath. She possessed immense strength, exceptional military talent, and was kind and generous to her subordinates. In terms of combat alone, Isdeath was nearly flawless. The young man in animal skins was stunned for a moment, then his face lit up with excitement. "Isdeath? General Isdeath?" Aoki nodded. Just as he had heard, Isdeath was quite popular among the common people, especially in places like the border, which frequently faced foreign invasions. However, Aoki knew that Isdeath didn't fight for the country or the people. She fought solely to satisfy her own lust for battle and bloodshed. Of course, he didn't share these thoughts with the young man. Objectively speaking, Isdeath had crippled the northern tribes and was indeed a great benefactor to those living on the Empire's northern border. Aoki waved his hand. Boom! A giant bird appeared out of nowhere and landed in an open space by the roadside, shaking the ground. This is a level 1 dangerous giant bird, Oriole," the young man in animal skin stammered. "This is your reward." "Thank you for the information," Aoki said, nodding to the young man before spreading his bat wings and soaring into the sky. By the time the young man came to his senses, Aoki's figure had already vanished into thin air. Could he be a legendary Imperial weapon user? The young man wondered, taking a deep breath as he gazed at the massive bird corpse before him, his expression growing excited. Wonderful. Now that they had this meat, they wouldn't have to worry about relocating in the short term. Chapter 140, Someone in the Sky. _________. A massive figure resembling the legendary dragon, but with 4 wings on its back, slowly drifted through the sky. Below, the humans were singing and dancing, blissfully unaware of the giant creature overhead. The 4-winged dragon glanced down indifferently, and its enormous body vanished, reappearing thousands of miles away in an instant. The long river roared, churning up large flakes of white snow. It dove into the river, slowly closing its eyes. After leaving the small village, Aoki did not hesitate any longer. He flapped his wings and flew south without pause. Although the open sky left him vulnerable to attacks from dangerous flying creatures, his ability to travel through space made him fearless of surprise assaults. On the surface, flying seemed no faster than running at full speed, but in truth, flight was not restricted by terrain and allowed for much quicker travel. Besides, the dangers on the ground were no fewer than those in the sky. Without needing rest or worrying about physical exhaustion, Aoki moved at an astonishing speed, leaving the cold region behind in less than a day. The snow and ice covering the earth gradually melted away, and the temperature began to rise. However, the living conditions of the people had not improved much. Dilapidated and abandoned villages were everywhere, and most of the inhabitants were pale and thin, clearly having endured long periods of starvation. The large trees formed a natural wall, with houses scattered in the open space in between. Aoki emerged from one of the houses and left the village, where only a single person remained. He knew only the general direction of his destination. Over long distances, even the slightest deviation in his route could place him far off course. He had to constantly ask for directions and adjust his path. Aoki flapped his wings, flying across the sky. In an instant, he arrived at a valley and looked down. The valley was surrounded by mountains on three sides, creating a natural fortress. The only exit was blocked by towering walls and heavy gates. A few rough houses dotted the valley. Are these the robbers the lady mentioned? With the empire on the verge of collapse, more and more evildoers were surfacing, and bandits were becoming increasingly common. When he had asked for directions earlier, the lady had warned him about a group of vicious robbers in the area and advised him to be cautious when passing through. On the city wall, the bald-headed robber standing guard yawned. He suddenly froze, rubbing his eyes to make sure he wasn't mistaken, then hurriedly called for his companions. "Hey, look! There's someone in the sky. Are you still drunk? How could there be someone flying in the heavens?" His companion cursed and turned to look. His vision suddenly darkened. Before he could comprehend what was happening, his consciousness sank into nothingness. Aoki's fingers had pierced the robber's forehead. Thin strands of blood emerged from his fingertips, fusing into the robber's body. What kind of monster are you?" The bald robber trembled in fear as the winged figure who had just been in the sky appeared beside him, killing his companion. Aoki said nothing, raising his other hand. Whoosh! His fingers pierced the bald robber's head, and a torrent of blood surged from his fingertips. Both robbers collapsed, their bodies twisting and convulsing. To be a robber, one had to possess some level of strength. The physical abilities of these two were far superior to those of ordinary humans, giving them a distinct advantage over common folk in this world of demon slayers. The stronger the individual, the longer it took to transform into a demon. He wondered how long it would take for these two to complete their transformation. This was the first time he had created a demon in this world. When the old lady had told him about the bandits who were committing all manner of evil, burning, killing, looting, he had grown interested. They were perfect material. In the world of Akame Kill, Aoki had two goals: to collect Imperial tools and to level up his King of the White Walker ability. Heading to the Imperial capital was for the first goal, but the second could not be neglected. He wanted to take this opportunity to experiment. Aoki tossed the two robbers aside. Suddenly, the door of a building below creaked open, and a drunk man stumbled out. He caught sight of the scene before him and was instantly startled. As he processed what he had witnessed, his intoxicated mind quickly sobered, and he shouted at the top of his lungs, "Enemy! There's an enemy!" Aoki did nothing to stop him. The next day, the sun rose slowly, its warm rays filling the world. The bandits' lair in the valley was eerily quiet, not a single sound emerging from within. Aoki clapped his hands, satisfied, as he turned to look at the last remaining demon. He opened the door and stepped outside. The bright morning sunshine lifted his spirits. Success! Although only the strongest leaders had provided him with experience, he had at least confirmed that his theory of creating demons and then killing them was feasible. However, he had also discovered a problem. He couldn't leave a curse within the demons he created. In other words, he had to actively sever the connection. Otherwise, the demons were treated as allies by the system. After devouring them, they replenished his energy but didn't give him any experience. I'll have to be more careful next time. Before creating a demon, I need to beat it half to death or find a way to control it, Aoki mused. Once transformed into a demon, the sheer immortality alone would drastically increase their strength. Anyone who could give him experience had to be powerful in their own right. And he couldn't leave behind any curse. It would be embarrassing to accidentally create an enemy he couldn't handle. Beyond the valley lay a wide river, its waters rushing and splashing large patches of white foam. Aoki took a few steps before suddenly coming to a halt. By the river, a young girl sat. She had short black hair, a slim figure, and delicate features. A knife lay beside her as she silently munched on a bag of snacks. His eyes shifted from her face to the blade at her side. Sensing his gaze, the girl turned her head towards him, clutching her snacks and eyeing him warily. The corners of Aoki's mouth twitched, and he sighed inwardly. I didn't expect to meet her here. Black pupils. Akame's younger sister. A member of the Empire's assassin corps. The wielder of the March of the Dead, Yatsufusa. The knife beside her must be Yatsufusa, the weapon capable of turning corpses into puppets. If used properly, that ability could be incredibly powerful. While Kurome's puppets weren't particularly impressive, she had still managed to hold off most of the night raids single-handedly for a time. She had even forced Najenda to expend her life force, allowing Susanoo to use his secret techniques to finally defeat Kurome. If she could control a few super dangerous beasts, Kurome could potentially be even more terrifying than his death. However, the main materials for crafting Imperial weapons came from the bodies of super dangerous species. It was still unclear whether Yatsufusa could control multiple super dangerous species at once. Forget it. I'd better not mess with her. Aoki averted his gaze and activated his space shuttle ability. But at that very moment, beneath the river's surface, a creature resembling a dragon, with 4 wings on its back, suddenly opened its eyes. A strange wave of energy rippled outward. On the shore, Aoki's expression changed. Before he could react, his body abruptly vanished. Chapter 141, Crisis. __________. The rushing river transformed into a vast primeval forest, and a desolate atmosphere hung in the air. Aoki stepped on a dead branch, his brow slightly furrowed. This wasn't his intended destination. Just before activating Space Shuttle, he sensed an unfamiliar spatial fluctuation and altered his course. Someone nearby also wielded the power of space, and their mastery of it was far more refined and potent than his own. Aoki quietly assessed the situation for a moment and shook his head. This won't work. The area was filled with complex and powerful spatial fluctuations. It was like a heavy rain suddenly falling onto a calm lake, with raindrops creating ripples. If he forced his way into space travel, these fluctuations would affect him, rendering him completely out of control. Flying over the lake wouldn't be a problem. But if he were pulled into the lake, lost in the turbulence of space, that would be troublesome. This unpredictability was one of the drawbacks of Space Shuttle. In the Demon Slayer world, no one had ever achieved such spatial mastery, so the weakness had never surfaced. I was too careless. Aoki sighed, reminding himself once again that this wasn't the Demon Slayer world anymore. Though his immortality and space travel gave him a significant edge in survival, it didn't mean he was invincible. Do you know what's going on? A voice came from nearby, and Aoki turned his head. Kurome stood not far away, gripping Yatsufusa, looking around cautiously. It's probably a super dangerous species that controls space and brought us here, Aoki replied. Kurome was likely dragged into this mess because of him. Though he didn't know the exact details, the cause was probably his use of space shuttle. But this wasn't necessarily a bad thing. Kurome's strength was exceptional, and given the circumstances, she probably wouldn't pick a fight with him. That meant he had a powerful ally on hand. A super dangerous species? Kurome looked at him. What do we do now? What do you think? Kurome shook her head. Then let's start by exploring the area, Aoki suggested. He didn't have a better plan at the moment. Kurome approached him, making her willingness to cooperate clear. The two picked a random direction and began walking. Aoki didn't risk flying. The dense canopy obscured the sky, and who knew what might be lurking above. With space shuttle out of commission, he had to be extra cautious. Kurome pulled out a bag of snacks from somewhere, popping a piece of candy into her mouth. Aoki glanced over. Kurome hugged the snack bag tightly. I'm not sharing. I didn't want any, Aoki replied. After a moment of silence, he added, your body's nearing its limit. If you keep eating, you won't last much longer. Kurome's life had been far from easy. When she was young, she and her sister Akame were sold to the Empire's assassin agency, where they were trained to become killers. Both Kurome and Akame passed the selection for the elite group of 7, but since siblings couldn't be part of the same unit, Kurome was forcibly separated and subjected to drug injections to enhance her abilities. The drugs had unlocked Kurome's potential, giving her immense strength. But at the same time, they had made her heavily dependent on them. Continuous use had ravaged her body. At only 15 or 16 years old, her body was already at its breaking point. The drugs had warped her mind. Because she cherished her companions, she used the March of the Dead to turn their fallen comrades into dolls, keeping them by her side. When Akame betrayed the Empire and joined the Revolutionary Army, she tried to convince Kurome to follow her. However, Kurome saw it as a betrayal of her comrades and refused to leave. The two sisters still loved each other, yet both desired to kill the other, creating a deeply twisted relationship. Kurome stared at Aoki for a moment before continuing to eat her snacks as if nothing had happened. She was aware of the dangers of the drugs and had tried to quit taking them. However, her body had become severely dependent on the drugs, and stopping them would cause her condition to deteriorate even faster. Besides, she needed the strength the drugs provided. Without her power, she would become worthless and be abandoned. She absolutely couldn't allow that to happen. But the supply of drugs was running low. Moreover, she needed to report back and had to leave here as soon as possible. Aoki remained silent. The two continued on. Unexpectedly, they soon emerged from the jungle, but the sight before them brought them to a halt. The ground was gray and lifeless, and countless skeletons were strewn across it. The largest of the skeletons towered over them, more than 10 meters tall, resembling buildings. Some of their bones were thicker than a human waist. The smallest skeletons were barely a few centimeters in size, smaller than a palm. The skeletons varied in shape, clearly belonging to different creatures. A light mist hung in the air, casting a hazy veil over the world. Something's coming, Kurome said. Aoki nodded. He had sensed it too. The mist swirled, and dangerous species began to emerge. Their thick legs and tails supported their upright, humanoid lizard forms, each one looking vicious and fierce. Do you recognize them? Aoki asked. Kurome shook her head. No. There was no time for further conversation as the dangerous creatures charged at them. Leave this to me. Aoki stepped forward, positioning himself in front of Kurome. He was brimming with energy and unafraid of exerting himself. These creatures gave off the aura of level 1 dangerous species. He could handle them on his own. Not knowing what else they might face, it was wise to conserve Kurome's strength, just in case. Although her Imperial weapon was powerful, it took a heavy toll on both her body and mind. Hearing Aoki's words, Kurome refrained from drawing her sword. As an expert assassin, she had already sensed that this man was no ordinary person. Whoosh! A dangerous species lunged at Aoki. In his heightened state of awareness, every movement of the creature was visible. Aoki shifted his body slightly, narrowly avoiding its claws, then turned his hand into a blade and struck swiftly. Swish! His palm cut through the creature's neck like a real knife, causing a fountain of blood to spray out. More dangerous species attacked. Aoki dodged and countered with punches, not a single one of them able to touch him. Boom! 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 Moments later, all the dangerous creatures lay dead. Kurome stared at Aoki, wide-eyed. This man's strength was far greater than she had anticipated, and he didn't seem to be an Imperial weapon user. Who was he? A master from the Imperial Fist Temple, perhaps? But she had encountered Imperial Fist Temple fighters before, and their style wasn't like his. Even after dispatching the dangerous species, Aoki's expression remained tense as he gazed deeper into the fog. Suddenly, his face changed. Grabbing Kurome, he swiftly retreated into the forest. Chapter 142, Secret Realm. The moment Aoki and Kurome stepped into the forest, a ball of red energy shot out from the mist, striking the spot where they had just stood. Boom! The red energy rapidly expanded, transforming into a violent blaze. A massive mushroom-shaped fire cloud erupted, consuming the rocks, soil, and trees in its path. A powerful shockwave swept through, scraping the ground layer by layer as though it were tofu. Trees, thick as waists, were uprooted and sent flying. The rolling heat waves turned into a fierce, howling wind. After a while, the chaos subsided, leaving a deep crater several dozen meters wide, surrounded by scorched earth. Phew! Aoki lowered his arm, wiping the dust from his face, before spitting out a mouthful of blood. He turned to Kurome and asked, "You okay?" "I'm fine," Kurome replied, sitting up. "Most of the damage was blocked by you. I'm glad you're alright." Aoki glanced outside, and through the gaps between the trees, he could make out the large crater in the ground. "Is that the super dangerous species?" Kurome nodded. "This one is considered extremely powerful among the super dangerous species. Having a demon doll of her own, she was well aware of their strength." "I see," Aoki murmured. Judging by the power they'd just witnessed, he figured he could withstand one attack, maybe two or three, without dying. But if he didn't resist and let them continuously bombard him, it would be fatal. They waited a while longer, but there was no second attack, nor did they catch a glimpse of the super dangerous species that had attacked. Aoki, puzzled, asked, "What does this mean? Are we being warned not to enter its territory?" Crash. Just then, a rustling sound came from behind them. A group of dangerous species emerged from the forest, their green eyes gleaming with cruelty and bloodlust as they stared at the pair. "Don't act rashly. Just hand it over." Aoki trailed off, falling silent. Another group of dangerous species appeared from a different direction. "They must have been drawn by the commotion earlier," Kurome said. "More will definitely show up soon. We should leave." Aoki agreed with her suggestion, and the two took the opportunity to make their escape. When one direction proved impassable, they explored 3 other paths. Before they realized it, night had fallen. At the base of a cliff, a small flame flickered. Aoki sat down, taking out paper and pen, sketching and writing, while Kurome focused on grilling the meat. The firewood crackled, and in the distance, the occasional roar of an animal could be heard. Suddenly, Aoki felt a tap on his shoulder. He turned to look. "Here you go." Kurome handed him a piece of grilled meat, one in each hand. Aoki eyed the charred piece and asked, "What's this?" "Barbecue." She shoved one piece into his hand, then bit into the other. Her face immediately scrunched up. Aoki noticed the inside of the meat was still raw and bloody. What surprised him the most was that Kurome didn't spit it out. Instead, she forced herself to swallow and was even ready to take a second bite. Aoki quickly stopped her. "Let me handle this." The meat was dangerous, and eating it like that would definitely lead to food poisoning. He hadn't expected Kurome's cooking skills to be this bad. Aoki waved his hand, and a bottle of white powder appeared on the ground. But when he looked again, he was stunned. Only the salt remained? He had taken more than a dozen different spices, yet only one bottle had materialized. The rest were all gone. A 1 in 10 success rate, even the dogs would shake their heads at it. Of course, the remaining 9/10 don't all fall into spatial turbulence. It's more likely their landing points have shifted. In fact, only about 1/10 might actually fall into turbulence. However, this is a matter of life and death, and even a 1 in 10 chance is terrifying. After a few more tries, Aoki finally managed to gather enough seasoning. Although he didn't need to eat, he still prepared a variety of supplies in his alternate space, especially after it expanded. Not just seasonings, but also grains like rice, corn, soybeans, as well as clean water, daily necessities, and more. With all that extra space, he could pretty much do whatever he wanted. Very busy indeed. Aoki pointed at the sizzling steak and said, "Try it." Kurome took a bite, and her eyes immediately lit up. "Tasty." Aoki smiled. "I am a professional chef." Though calling himself a professional chef was a bit of an exaggeration, he had studied cooking systematically. He wasn't on the level of a true professional, lacking a sense of taste and relying only on experience to season his dishes. Still, compared to the blackened, blood-filled barbecue that Kurome had made, with no seasoning whatsoever, his dish was undoubtedly a masterpiece. Kurome munched happily on the steak, clearly enjoying it. Aoki picked up his pen and continued sketching. Kurome quickly finished the steak, looked at the remaining barbecue, then glanced at Aoki. "You're not eating?" Aoki waved his hand. "Eat it." Kurome hesitated for a second, then eagerly grabbed another piece of barbecue, enjoying it as she munched happily. While eating, she stretched her neck to look at the notebook in Aoki's hand. "What are you drawing?" "A map," Aoki replied, not looking up. "A map?" Kurome's curiosity was piqued. Aoki pointed at the notebook and explained, "This is where we first arrived. Here's where we were attacked by the super dangerous species. And this marks the areas we explored earlier today." In addition to landmarks and unique terrain, it also recorded the dangerous species in each area. Dangerous species weren't just strong beasts, many had special abilities. For example, today they had encountered a group of snakes disguised as branches. It wasn't something you could detect by sight alone. If Aoki hadn't kept his transparent world active, they might have fallen into serious trouble. Those snakes were venomous, and their poison was particularly lethal. Even if it couldn't kill him outright, it could still cause a lot of complications. Kurome took out a piece of candy and stuffed it into her mouth. "This must be a secret realm." Aoki nodded. The so-called secret realms were areas with high levels of danger, places where humans couldn't survive long. There wasn't anything inherently special about them. "So, what's the plan for tomorrow?" "Keep exploring." Kurome silently nodded in agreement. The super dangerous species hidden in the mist was extremely powerful. Even with Imperial weapon, she was unwilling to take the risk. As the wielder of Yatsufusa, she knew that while the puppet retained much of its power from when it was alive, its true strength had significantly decreased. And that super dangerous species was obviously far stronger than Yatsufusa had been when he was alive. However, if they didn't leave by tomorrow, she would run out of medicine. And there had been no news from the assassination unit for 2 days. She wondered if there was a problem. Chapter 143, for super dangerous species. _____________. The fire flickered, its heat filling the air and driving away the night's chill. Kurome lay curled up next to the fire, fast asleep, a bag of snacks clutched in her hands. On it, the words Kurome's snacks were clearly visible. Aoki leaned back against a rock, his head resting on his arms. He had been mulling over a problem since the start of the day. Where were the complex spatial fluctuations here coming from? Space, or time and space, has a natural ability to self-repair. From severe space cracks to minor fluctuations, they would inevitably disappear over time if not influenced by external forces. However, since the daytime, the spatial fluctuations here had not weakened. There had to be one or more sources of the disturbance. And it had to be related to the super dangerous creature that had teleported them here. Find the source, destroy it, and then space travel would become possible. Aoki had left 2 space markers as a precaution on their journey here, which would now come in handy. He looked up at the sky. If he could fly, it would be much easier to survey the terrain. However, whenever he looked up, a faint sense of danger stirred in his heart. Something was definitely wrong up there. Is there another super dangerous species? Aoki grinned at the thought. Adding the one that controlled space, that made 3 super dangerous species in this small area. No. There were at least 3, possibly more. The sun broke through the darkness, and daylight returned. Kurome stirred, opening her eyes and immediately grabbing Yatsufusa, sitting up in a vigilant posture. Awake? Aoki's voice, familiar and calm, came from beside her. Kurome relaxed, nodded, and found her snack bag. She took out a piece of candy and popped it into her mouth. I'm planning to check the sky, Aoki announced. Just because he felt a sense of danger didn't mean he could ignore his duty to investigate. Even if there was a super dangerous species in the sky, it couldn't kill him with one blow. His main concern was whether the creature would chase him. How will you get up there? Kurome asked. I have a plan. Then I'll come with you. Aoki smiled. Kurome was a dependable partner. No, it'll be easier if I go alone. But you need to stay ready for a fight. If there is a super dangerous species up there and it comes down after me, we'll need to be prepared to either drive it off or kill it. Kurome's super dangerous puppet was incredibly powerful, and Aoki had specifically conserved her strength for a situation like this. I understand, Kurome said, drawing her Yatsufusa but not yet summoning the puppets. With a sudden whoosh, huge black bat wings spread from Aoki's back, and his figure shot up into the sky. Kurome watched him ascend, her black eyes glittering with curiosity. Is that a taigu? It feels different. Aoki soared like a rocket. As he neared the treetops, he flapped his wings twice before folding them in tightly, crashing through the tree canopy like a bullet. After a brief moment of darkness, the view opened up before him. Aoki emerged from the canopy and surveyed his surroundings, surprise flashing across his face. Contrary to his expectations, they weren't on an island. Below him stretched a dense, lush, primeval forest. Beyond that, a barren, misty gray wasteland littered with bones came into view. Through the mist, the faint outline of a towering mountain could be seen in the distance. The other side was exactly as Aoki had thought, an endless ocean. Before he could take in more of the view, a sharp whistling sound reached his ears. Before he could react, razor-sharp wind blades struck him. Puff, puff, puff. Aoki was instantly torn to pieces, his body shredded, even his head split in two. The immense wind pressure bore down on him like invisible hands, forcing his body into a rapid descent. Aoki rolled his eyes toward the source of the attack. A massive gray-white figure appeared in his field of vision, resembling the legendary pterosaur, with a wingspan nearly 50 meters wide. Sure enough, there's another super dangerous species, Aoki muttered as he crashed into the tree canopy below. As he fell, mouths appeared all over his body, each opening to create a swallowing force. The fragmented parts of his body began to pull together, regenerating and recovering. After all, if Muzan Kibutsuji could do it, so could he. However, the suction force was limited, only strong enough to gather his limbs. Just before hitting the ground, Aoki's body had fully regenerated. His bat wings unfurled, slightly slowing his descent, though he was still badly injured. 80% of his bones were broken, and all his internal organs were ruptured. Yet, when he stood up, he was completely healed. Kurome stood frozen, stunned by his extraordinary abilities. There's definitely a super dangerous species up there, Aoki said. It looks like a pterosaur, and it can launch wind blade attacks. Its destructive power is terrifying. In comparison to the previous super dangerous species, this one was less threatening to him. Wind blades couldn't kill him completely, even if he was sliced apart, he could regenerate. So, what should we do now? Kurome asked. Let's head west and check it out, Aoki replied. There's an ocean in that direction. He had already determined the direction by observing the sun. Do you think there are super dangerous species in the ocean? Kurome asked. It's possible, Aoki said. But we need to see it ourselves before we can come up with a plan. Kurome agreed, and they set off. The journey wasn't easy. The forest was crawling with dangerous species, many of them extremely lethal. They fought their way through, battling as they went. Along the way, Aoki continued to search for the source of the spatial fluctuations, but found nothing. By the time they reached the beach, it was already the next day. One glance was all it took to know there were more super dangerous species here. A massive snail, as large as a small hill, lay sprawled across the beach, producing incredibly strong mucus. When Aoki tried stepping on it, he had to cut off his own legs to escape the sticky trap. It's pretty clear now. There are a total of 4 super dangerous species here. 3 of them are currently stationed, 1 blocking the sky, 1 the sea, and 1 the land. Aoki added, now, we need to decide which one we should target as our breakthrough point. Kurome quietly ate a piece of candy before responding, we can only go after the species in the east. She knew she wouldn't be able to help against the one in the sky. The giant snail was immobile, covered in that sticky mucus. The only possibility left was the dangerous species to the east, the one they hadn't yet encountered. Aoki nodded. But before we move forward, we need to confirm one thing, will the creature in the sky come down to assist? Chapter 144, Super Dangerous? The waves crashed onto the beach, washing over the giant snail's feet. The entire coastline sparkled, as if covered with a layer of silver gauze. A seabird slowly descended, searching for shellfish to eat. As soon as its feet touched the beach, they became stuck, and the bird lost its balance, falling flat with its entire body glued to the sand. Chirp, chirp. The seabird struggled desperately, but the more it moved, the more it became trapped. Suddenly, a translucent tentacle zipped by at a speed too fast for the naked eye to see. Crash! The sea surged again, and the seabird vanished, as though it had never been there. Aoki and Kurome stood at the edge of the beach, watching the scene unfold from a distance. That must be its method of attack, Kurome remarked. I'll leave the response to you. Aoki nodded, spread his bat wings, and flew toward the giant snail. The giant snail remained motionless, its tentacles swaying unconsciously, as if unaware of what was happening in the world around it. Aoki stayed vigilant. He quickly closed the gap and threw a punch aimed at the giant snail's head. Whoosh! The giant snail retracted its head into its shell, with lightning speed. Clang! Aoki's fist collided with the shell, producing a sharp sound. The snail didn't even budge, and his fist became stuck to the shell. At that moment, tentacles shot out from the small holes in the snail's shell, darting toward Aoki like black shadows. Ridiculous defense. Touch it, and you get stuck. And with all those tentacles? They're fast too. How are we supposed to fight this thing? This has got to be a joke, Aoki muttered to himself. He flapped his wings hard, pulling with all his might until his fist broke free from the snail's shell. The flesh on his hand tore off completely, leaving bare white bones. He quickly retreated. The tentacles missed, and the giant snail slowly poked its head out, opening its mouth wide. Splurt! A massive glob of thick mucus shot out of the snail's mouth. To the giant snail, it was just phlegm, but to Aoki, it looked like a giant ball of slime over 2 meters in diameter. Not only was it moving incredibly fast, but the timing and angle of the attack were so precise that Aoki had no time to dodge. It's been 3 days since I lost the space shuttle. I miss it, Aoki sighed. He opened his palm, aimed at the oncoming slime, and his flesh expanded, forming a meat shield. Pah! The slime stuck to the shield. Aoki cut off his palm, which was now covered in mucus, and distanced himself from the giant snail, watching it from afar. The giant snail stopped moving. These super dangerous species, at least the ones in this secret realm, if they had levels like professions, would be above level 30, Aoki thought to himself. In other words, if a super dangerous species had a profession, its quality would be at least 3 stars. Of course, if Aoki could obtain a super dangerous profession, he would certainly be stronger than this giant snail once he reached level 30. Just like how the demon profession is only 2 stars, but once he reached the highest level, he could defeat Muzan Kibutsuji. In other words, the profession he had obtained was essentially an enhanced version of its original power. But that wasn't the main issue. The real question was whether the super dangerous species profession could truly exist. After all, the leader of the Empire's recently emerging religion, the Way of Tranquility, was actually a hybrid of human and dangerous species. He had abilities like photographic memory, future prediction, mind reading, and wound healing. This proved that humans could possess the bloodline of dangerous species. In addition, fundamentally speaking, much of the power behind the Imperial arms actually comes from super dangerous species. If a taigu is used for a long time, it may corrode its user, assimilating them into the very creature it was forged from, especially transformation and armor-based Imperial arms. Being possessed by demons grants similar abilities. Even after 1,000 years, the muscles of Tyrant, the super dangerous species that created Haunted, remain alive. This is far from a good thing. When a human is corrupted, they gradually transform into a dangerous species, effectively resurrecting a long-extinct super dangerous species within themselves. However, it's also one method of acquiring super dangerous blood. Aoki cut off his thoughts. There were still too many issues with this idea. Dangerous species aren't necessarily stronger than Imperial weapons users. At least these giant snails didn't seem anywhere near as threatening as his death. Moreover, he had left the world of Demon Slayer to reclaim his humanity. Becoming a super dangerous species would only take him further away from that goal. Aoki refocused his attention on the giant snail. Let's see if we can get through. The range of space fluctuation interference couldn't be infinite. As long as he escaped that range, he could perform space travel. Aoki flapped his wings and flew over the giant snail. The snail remained completely still, like an inanimate object. As he drew closer, Aoki increased his speed, but still, the snail didn't move. However, just as he passed above it, Aoki's face changed, and he abruptly stopped. Puff! Countless tentacles suddenly shot out from the snail, weaving an impenetrable web in the sky. If Aoki hadn't stopped in time, he would have flown straight into the trap. Good thing I can see through the transparent world, Aoki thought, quickly retreating. But the giant snail wasn't finished. The massive net of tentacles continued to pursue him, aiming to ensnare him. I won't be able to escape. Aoki's instincts told him that he was too deep in. The tentacles were incredibly fast, and coated with that sticky mucus. Once touched, there would be no getting free. Whoosh! Aoki suddenly shot upward at a 90-degree angle, like a scallion being pulled from the ground. Before the tentacles could lock onto his trajectory, he had escaped their range. Before he could even catch his breath, a sharp whistling sound came from above. He looked up. Countless dangerous pterosaur-like species gathered, forming a massive dark cloud that blotted out the sky. Among them, a gigantic creature with a wingspan of over 50 meters stood out. It's really here. But why wasn't there any movement earlier? Aoki sensed something and glanced toward the forest below. Is it because it's higher than the forest? So, the area beneath the forest is controlled by the giant snail, and the skies are ruled by the super pterosaur? Whoosh! A wind blade sliced through the air, cutting Aoki in half. He couldn't afford to linger any longer and dived diagonally downward. The giant snail and super pterosaur showed no signs of backing down. Aoki dodged tentacles and wind blades as he descended, finally landing on the ground. The super pterosaur glanced at him once more before turning back toward the forest. The giant snail also ceased its movements. "Are you okay?" Kurome looked up at him, concern in her eyes. Aoki shook his head. "I'm fine, but it looks like we won't be able to leave without a fight." "Then let's fight." Kurome clenched her fists, determined. "All right. Let's head to the other side," Aoki said, wasting no more time. Now that he had figured out their movements, there was no point in hesitating. For him, the giant snail would actually be easier to handle. However, for Kurome and her puppets, fighting an enemy they couldn't even touch would be impossible. Taking everything into account, the dangerous species in the gray fog seemed like the more manageable opponent. With that, the two of them turned and left. Chapter 145, Battle Against Super Dangerous Species. _____________. Aoki and Kurome stood at the edge of the forest, staring at the gray-white ground covered in bones before them. It had taken them another day to get back to this place. This marked their 4th day here. Aoki glanced at Kurome. "Are you okay?" Kurohiro's face was pale and drained of color, her body trembling slightly, and her emotions seemed very unstable. With great effort, she took out a candy from her snack bag and put it into her mouth. Slowly, the trembling in her body began to subside. "I'm fine," she managed to say. She had run out of medicine the previous day, and to avoid depleting her supply too quickly, she had been stretching out the intervals between doses. As a result, her body was no longer receiving enough medication, and it had begun to react violently, sending waves of severe pain throughout her body, as if someone were cutting her flesh with a knife. "Let's get started as soon as possible," Kurome urged, looking up at Aoki. "All right." Aoki nodded. He had a pretty good idea of what was going on. They needed to act quickly. If Kurome lost her ability to fight, he would have to face these super dangerous species alone, and their chances of success would diminish even further. Kurome took a deep breath, drew out her weapon, the Yatsufusa, and pointed it toward the sky. Crack, crack, crack. A ball of black energy formed at the tip of the Yatsufusa, surrounded by black lightning. Rumble. The ground began to churn, and figures started to emerge one after another. "These are the puppets of the Yatsufusa," Aoki observed. The Yatsufusa could control up to 8 puppets. Among the black-eyed puppets, there were 6 humans, a dangerous chimpanzee-like species, and a large dangerous species that had been reduced to nothing but bones. Aoki's gaze lingered on the large dangerous species. This was Kurome's trump card, the super dangerous species Disutagiru. Even in this state, it still possessed formidable combat power. However, Aoki felt that there was a significant gap between Disutagiru and the 3 super dangerous species on this island. Kurome took another deep breath, and her body began to tremble once more. Without saying another word, Aoki stepped out of the jungle. Standing on the gray ground, he looked up. A light mist enveloped the sky and earth, and countless corpses could be seen faintly through it. He had no idea what this fog was, but it seemed like it would never dissipate. "How do we find that super dangerous species?" Aoki wondered aloud as he scanned the surroundings. Of course, it would be better if the super dangerous species didn't show up, so they could leave calmly. Just as the thought crossed his mind, the mist churned, and a massive ball of red energy shot out. Disutagiru stepped forward, blocking Aoki, opened its mouth, and unleashed a stream of blue energy. Boom! The red and blue energies collided, a massive explosion reverberating through the sky. 2 huge flames rose up and quickly merged, forming a colossal mushroom cloud. Dong, dong, dong. A towering figure slowly emerged from the mist, its heavy footsteps echoing. Aoki squinted, finally getting a clear view of this super dangerous species. It resembled a Tyrannosaurus rex, with two thick lower limbs supporting its body and a hefty tail dragging behind it. The difference was that it had four thick front limbs on its upper body and stood nearly 30 meters tall. Up close, it looked like a building. However, compared to the super pterosaurs and giant snails, this was actually the smallest of the lot. Kurome and the Yatsufasa aimed at the Tyrannosaurus rex. Go! Boom! Disutaguru charged forward first. The other puppets also launched their attacks from different directions. This time, Kurome didn't leave any puppets to protect herself. When activating the Yatsufusa, the user's power would be severely weakened. Especially since she was now taking an insufficient amount of medicine, her strength had dwindled to just 1/10 of what it once was. Any dangerous species could now pose a threat to her life. Despite this, she still sent all her puppets into battle, including Henta, who usually stayed by her side for protection. Kurome knew very well that this super dangerous species was incredibly powerful, and they wouldn't stand a chance without giving it their all. Disutaguru opened its mouth, blue energy brewing inside. The Tyrannosaurus rex suddenly turned around, and its massive tail whipped down, smashing into Disutaguru's head with tremendous force. Boom! The energy dissipated, and Disutaguru collapsed with a resounding thud, cracks spreading across its head. The chimpanzee-like puppet, Appleman, leaped up and slammed its fist into the Tyrannosaurus rex's knee. The other puppets also launched their attacks from various directions and in different ways. Roar! The Tyrannosaurus rex roared at the sky, then raised its right foot and stomped down with immense force. Boom! The ground shook, rocks shattered, and violent tremors rippled outward. All the puppets near the Tyrannosaurus rex were sent flying. Crash! Aoki flapped his wings and descended from the sky. The Tyrannosaurus rex swiped its two massive claws towards the center, aiming to crush Aoki. Compared to its colossal size, Aoki was not even a mouse, just a mere sparrow. Suddenly, Aoki folded his wings, and with a ripping sound, the clothes on his back were torn apart as 8 whips extended out. For him, this was the most efficient number of whips. Any more, and they would become too difficult to control accurately, reducing his combat effectiveness. Phew! The sharp ends of the whips pierced into the claws of the Tyrannosaurus rex. Although its skin was tough, it was far less durable than the shell of the giant snail. With a powerful tug on the 8 whips, Aoki's speed surged. The Tyrannosaurus rex's claws slashed through empty air. Aoki slipped through the gap, instantly closing in on the Tyrannosaurus rex's face, and delivered a punch. Phew! Flesh and blood exploded. A small hole appeared on the Tyrannosaurus rex's head. It cried out in pain and shook its head violently. Roar! Aoki was flung away but managed to swing his 8 whips, piercing them into the Tyrannosaurus rex's flesh, creating an arc in the air like a pendulum. The Tyrannosaurus rex abruptly turned its head, opening its mouth and aiming at Aoki. Red energy began to gather. The air suddenly grew hot. A massive sense of danger echoed in Aoki's mind, but he didn't panic. Rip! The clothes on his back tore again, and a bone whip extended out. Unlike the tube whips, which were as thick as a finger, the bone whip was formed by the extension of his spine and was as thick as an arm. The bone whip sliced through the air, and the sharp bone blade at its end pierced into the Tyrannosaurus rex's jaw. Phew! Blood splattered. The energy in the Tyrannosaurus rex's mouth dissipated, but it retaliated by slamming one of its claws down. Aoki felt like he'd been hit by a train. His body plummeted like a meteor, crashing into rocks that shattered upon impact. His entire body was drenched in blood. Boom! A ball of blue energy exploded on the Tyrannosaurus rex, and a burst of flames engulfed it. After a moment, the flames subsided, revealing the Tyrannosaurus rex's body. Aside from the burn marks where it had been directly hit, the rest of its body was unharmed. Such a massive size is really troublesome. Aoki sighed. Although he and the puppets had managed to inflict some damage on the Tyrannosaurus rex, given its enormous size, those injuries were practically insignificant. And there was another problem. All his techniques were designed for combat against humans, and they weren't very effective against a monster of this scale. Suddenly, one of the puppets was accidentally stepped on by the Tyrannosaurus Rex and reduced to a bloody pulp. Chapter 146, Beads in the Head. _______________. Ah. Kurome's face contorted in pain. When a puppet is destroyed, the backlash hits her hard, and in this case, the pain was over 10 times greater. The numbers are dwindling, Aoki muttered. He couldn't afford to delay any longer and rushed forward once more. Aside from Disbanding, none of the remaining black-eyed puppets stood a chance against the Tyrannosaurus Rex. To defeat this beast, they had to maximize everyone's strength. They couldn't let the puppets die in vain. Even with Aoki's assistance, the puppets continued to fall, but they managed to inflict more injuries on the Tyrannosaurus Rex. Boom! A cloud of flames erupted, engulfing a puppet and reducing it to a charred husk. Aoki dodged the Tyrannosaurus Rex's claws, distanced himself, and took a quick glance around. Only 3 puppets left, he noted grimly. Though these 3 were the strongest, including the still-standing Disbanding, they were all injured. In fact, Disbanding had taken the most hits, but had managed to recover each time. If this keeps up... Aoki turned his gaze back to the Tyrannosaurus Rex. Despite its many wounds, none were fatal. This can't go on. Even if they couldn't kill it, they needed to deal a truly crippling blow. Roar! The Tyrannosaurus Rex opened its mouth, spewing a massive ball of red energy that splintered into fireballs the size of basketballs. Boom boom boom. The fireballs rained down, expanding rapidly, like 100 cannons firing at once. Aoki's eyes narrowed, and instead of retreating, he charged forward. Though the attack seemed terrifying, it posed little threat to him. As long as he wasn't at the center of the explosions, the flames wouldn't hurt him. After releasing such a powerful attack, the Tyrannosaurus Rex would inevitably need a moment to catch its breath. This was the opportunity Aoki had been waiting for. He quickly closed in on the Tyrannosaurus Rex. The Tyrannosaurus Rex didn't ignore Aoki. It had already realized that among its foes, this small figure was the most dangerous. It turned slightly, sweeping its thick tail toward Aoki with a sharp whistle. Despite its massive size and lack of agility, the Tyrannosaurus Rex had excellent combat skills and could fully utilize every part of its body. The muscles of ancient creatures like Tyrant had been crafted into Imperial weapons, enduring for thousands of years. These extremely dangerous species had lived for who knows how long and were highly experienced in battle. Aoki had witnessed the destructive power of the Tyrannosaurus Rex's tail before, so he wasn't about to take it head-on. He prepared to dodge. Just then, another figure suddenly rushed out, its body covered in burns, and threw itself at the Tyrannosaurus Rex's tail without hesitation. Aoki recognized it as one of Kurome's most cherished puppets, a companion from her childhood who had been with her and her sister Akame for years. Bang! The puppet's arms shattered, and its sternum collapsed entirely as it collided with the massive tail. However, the impact managed to slow the Tyrannosaurus Rex's tail, just enough. Aoki didn't waste this precious opportunity. He bent his knees slightly, and with a powerful burst, his body soared into the sky. Bat wings are not useful in close combat. Although bat wings provide a degree of flexibility, they fall short of Aoki's natural agility. Moreover, their large size only serves to increase his vulnerability to attacks. Aoki stepped on the Tyrannosaurus Rex's body, using it as leverage to rapidly ascend until he was level with the beast's head in the blink of an eye. The Tyrannosaurus Rex's head was riddled with wounds, 2 of which were so deep they had pierced through its skull. These were Aoki's handiwork. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. 8 whips shot out, piercing into the Tyrannosaurus Rex's head, but none managed to penetrate deep enough to reach the bone. The Tyrannosaurus Rex opened its mouth. A glint of madness flashed in Aoki's eyes. It had been a long time since he felt truly threatened, but when it came to battle, he never lacked courage. His spirit seemed to sharpen, and a surge of strength flowed into every part of his body from nowhere. Unyielding will. This was the first time the skill had activated since he learned it. Even Muzan Kibutsuji hadn't pressured him enough to trigger it. Boom! The red energy struck him, erupting into a massive flame that engulfed Aoki. But the next moment, he burst out of the flames, his skin charred black. His skin was completely burned, the flames had seared through his muscles and into his body, scorching his internal organs. Aoki didn't even flinch. He kept his focus on the Tyrannosaurus Rex, his body tense and ready. The bone whip sliced through the air, and with a whoosh, the bone blade sank into one of the deepest wounds on the Tyrannosaurus Rex's head, carving a gash several dozen centimeters long. Through the wound, Aoki could see the white of the brain and a silver bead nestled inside. Beads? What are those? Aoki was momentarily stunned, but his movements didn't falter. The whips danced and pierced into the brain of the Tyrannosaurus Rex. Roar! The Tyrannosaurus Rex let out an earth-shattering roar, shook its head violently, and lunged at Aoki with its bloody jaws wide open. The bat wings spread wide, and Aoki swiftly ascended higher. The whip retracted from the Tyrannosaurus Rex's head, wrapping around the silver bead. Ignoring the foul brain matter, Aoki grasped the silver bead, and his eyes widened slightly. Could this be? Whoosh! Before he could process the thought, a sharp whistling sound reached his ears. He looked up to see a giant creature, shaped like a pterosaur with a wingspan of more than 50 meters, rapidly approaching. Aoki frowned. He had been meticulous in controlling himself, ensuring he never crossed the line, not even coming close. So, the answer was obvious. The Tyrannosaurus Rex had no sense of martial ethics and would call for help when it couldn't win a fight. Aoki immediately realized that the roar from the Tyrannosaurus Rex earlier was a signal for assistance. He had assumed that the three dangerous species had clearly divided territories, but now it was clear that this was only a superficial appearance. Aoki glanced at the Tyrannosaurus Rex. Even though its head had been pierced, and the whip had scrambled its brain, the beast was still alive and didn't appear to be dying at all. Aoki wasn't particularly surprised by this. Tyrants' muscles could live for thousands of years, how could a super dangerous species die so easily? However, he was certain that, although the Tyrannosaurus Rex was not dead, it was seriously injured. The key was that it had a massive vital point. If he continued to fight, he was confident he could kill it. But after a quick glance at the rapidly approaching super pterosaur, Aoki made a decisive choice and flew toward Kurome. Another fully intact super dangerous species was on the way, and more could join the fray at any moment. Their side had suffered heavy casualties, and only 2 puppets remained capable of fighting. This team battle was no longer winnable. They had to retreat. Crash! A sharp whistle sounded behind him, and Aoki glanced back, his expression shifting slightly. Huge wind blades were hurtling toward him at high speed. They were too fast. Though the blades wouldn't be fatal, they would certainly slow him down. Moreover, Aoki looked at the silver bead in his hand. If he lost it, there was no guarantee he'd get another chance to retrieve it. What to do? At that moment, a tall shadow suddenly appeared, standing behind Aoki. Disbanding opened its mouth, unleashing a torrent of blue energy, venting its power with abandon. The wind blades were obliterated instantly, and the entire sky turned blue. The Tyrannosaurus Rex took a few steps back, and the pterosaur halted its dive. Both super dangerous species stopped their attacks simultaneously. But after just a few seconds, Disbanding's energy plummeted. Without hesitation, Aoki rushed toward Kurome and picked her up, and quickly fled into the jungle. What should we do now? Kurome's usually beautiful face was now drained of all color. The plan to hunt the super dangerous species had failed, and she had nearly lost all of her puppets. Would they still have a chance to escape? Aoki didn't respond but instead looked back first. Good. The super pterosaur hadn't followed them. Its enormous size made it unsuitable for navigating the forest, but its speed and attack power were terrifying. If it had caught up with them, it could have caused serious trouble. Aoki then looked down at the silver bead in his hand. The bead was the size of an egg, warm to the touch, perfectly spherical, and had a smooth surface with no markings, resembling a massive pearl. From the moment he saw it, he could feel it. This silver bead emitted strong spatial fluctuations. This was most likely the culprit interfering with his space travel. For the past few days, he had been searching for the source of the space fluctuation interference, but had found nothing. No wonder, if it had been hidden in the head of a super dangerous species, it would have been impossible to find. If his guess was correct, destroying this silver bead should be enough to eliminate the interference with space fluctuations. Without that interference, he could use his space imprint shuttle to leave immediately. This was why he had abandoned the fight without hesitation. Aoki moved his fingers. Although no one knew exactly what this silver bead was, it was undoubtedly a space-related treasure. Such treasures were incredibly rare, and none of them could be considered insignificant. Aoki clenched his palm. Snap! The silver bead shattered into pieces. Chapter 147, Traitor Kurome. _______. A sudden and powerful spatial fluctuation erupted, then quickly contracted. Aoki was momentarily stunned but quickly snapped back to reality, his gaze shifting to the back of his left hand. It had been 4 or 5 days since he arrived in this world, and the energy in the silver flower had only recovered a small amount. At this rate, it would take at least 3 years for the energy to fully restore. This pace was neither fast nor slow, but certainly not ideal. But now, energy was pouring in rapidly, and in the blink of an eye, the entire flower lit up. Full? Completely full? Aoki's eyes lit up with surprise. This kind of bead could actually recharge the world shuttle Mark. Now, as long as he finds the pole, he can leave at any time. What's more, there were 4 super dangerous species here. Could that mean there were 3 more of these silver beads? Aoki's eyes gleamed with excitement. 3 beads and 3 quick charging opportunities meant 3 safeguards. In a world like this, a 3-year charging time was still manageable. However, if he ever entered a world where it would take thousands or even tens of thousands of years to replenish energy, these beads could be life-saving. He had to find a way to obtain the other 3 beads. What once seemed like a cage he desperately wanted to escape had now become a land of fortune and treasures in his eyes. At that moment, another wave of surprise washed over Aoki. The spatial fluctuation interference had vanished. This bead was indeed the source of the interference. But just as he began to feel relief, his expression shifted again as he looked up. He couldn't see anything, but he could sense a powerful spatial fluctuation spreading outward. Has the super dangerous creature that controls the power of space returned? Is it because the bead was destroyed? What's the connection between it and the silver bead? Countless questions swirled in Aoki's mind, but there were no answers. He glanced in the direction of the spatial fluctuations, then immediately activated the Space Mark shuttle. In an instant, he and Kurome disappeared. The moment they vanished, a massive 4-winged dragon appeared in the sky. It glanced down, then with a flash, it appeared on the gray land to the east. When it saw the wound on the Tyrannosaurus Rex's head, intense anger flared in its eyes. One moment it was a primeval forest, and in the blink of an eye, it was a barren mountain covered in ice and snow. Kurome blinked. "Where are we?" "Shiranami," Aoki replied. "We're back?" A hint of surprise appeared in Kurome's eyes. She remembered this city from the northern border of the Empire. "Yes. Let's get out of here first." Aoki destroyed a rock beneath his feet and took to the air. As a spatial ability user, the super dangerous species obviously had a much better grasp of spatial power than he did. Although the possibility was low, he had to be prepared in case it decided to pursue them. Only after they landed near Shiranami and entered the city did Aoki finally relax. It was safe now. He gently set Kurome down. Kurome's body wavered, and Aoki quickly caught her again. Are you okay? I'm fine. Kurome shook her head, took a deep breath, and stood up straight. I should go. Aoki looked at her pale face and asked, Where are you going? Can I take you there? No. Kurome pulled out a candy from her snack bag. After eating it, the trembling in her body gradually subsided, and her face regained some color. It was the last one. She looked up at Aoki. I don't even know your name yet. The two had lived together in the forest for several days, but had never asked each other personal questions. Aoki. My name is Kurome. A smile appeared on Kurome's face. I'm leaving. She waved her hand and trotted away, her figure quickly vanishing from Aoki's sight. After leaving, Kurome's face turned pale again. She clutched a tree by the roadside, bending over in pain. She was missing too much medicine, and one pill was just a drop in the bucket, offering no real relief. It's been 4 days. I have to get back as soon as possible. Kurome struggled to stand up. The problem was that this was the northern border of the Empire, and getting back to the assassination base was no easy task in her current condition. 3 agonizing days passed slowly. Who? There was no trace of blood left in Kurome's face. Every inch of her body ached, and her muscles trembled uncontrollably. This journey felt like hell for her. But she made it. This was the base of the assassination unit. Kurome leaned against the wall for support as she slowly walked forward. She knocked on the door with the agreed signal. A moment later, the door opened, and a black-haired boy stepped out. His eyes widened in shock when he saw her. Kurome? Why are you back? Kurome lifted her gaze. What's wrong? Can't I come back? The black-haired boy, still surprised, said, You've been missing for 7 days. I thought something happened to you. You look terrible. Are you hurt? Kurome shook her head. I'm just out of medicine. That makes sense. Your medicine should have run out 5 days ago, the boy replied quickly. Come inside, quickly. It'll be trouble if someone sees you. Kurome was silent for a moment, then followed him into the room. She looked around. Where is everyone? There was a big mission yesterday, so everyone went out. I didn't make it. Otherwise, you wouldn't have found anyone here today. The black-haired boy smiled and said, Wait here a moment. I'll get you some medicine. Good. Kurome nodded and watched him leave, waiting silently. Suddenly, despite the pain in her body, she dodged to the side. Whoosh! A bullet pierced the spot on the sofa where she had just been sitting. The black-haired boy returned, his smile gone. He held a pistol in his hand and was flanked by 4 others, 2 men and 2 women. Why? Kurome asked, puzzled. The black-haired boy replied coldly, Kurome, you betrayed the Empire and have been removed from the assassins list. I didn't betray anyone. Kurome's voice wavered. So where have you been these past days? The black-haired boy's tone was icy. After completing your mission, you disappeared for 7 days. Your medicine should have run out long ago, but you didn't return. Kurome explained, I was teleported to a secret place by a super dangerous species, and I only just escaped today. You have 8 puppets, Disutaguru, and so many others, yet you were still stopped by dangerous creatures? They weren't ordinary dangerous species. There were 3 super dangerous species there. 3 super dangerous species? Why haven't I heard of such a dangerous place in the Empire? Can you tell me where it is? The black-haired boy sneered, and the others looked on with indifference. Where is Wilfred? I want to speak to him in person. Kurome took a deep breath. She really couldn't answer his question. The black-haired boy raised his pistol, aiming it at Kurome's forehead. No need, Kurome. You've been branded a traitor and are on the assassin's hit list. Chapter 148, The Death of Kurome. Underscore 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 underscore. Bang! A burst of fire erupted from the muzzle as a bullet shot out. Kurome dodged with a leap, drawing the Yatsufusa. Her face grew even paler, and sweat trickled down her fair skin. I'm not a traitor. Despite her words, the black-haired boy and the others remained indifferent as they quickly closed in on Kurome. They moved cautiously. As the wielder of the Yatsufusa, Kurome was well known among the assassination forces. Even in her weakened state, they dared not be careless. Rumble. The ground trembled as a figure emerged from it. Pain etched across Kurome's face. This was the last puppet she had left. But using the Yatsufusa now caused her immense suffering. Be careful, the black-haired boy growled. 3 of them rushed toward the puppet, while the remaining 2 continued their assault on Kurome. Swoosh! A long sword came crashing down, its blade glinting coldly. Kurome barely managed to raise the Yatsufusa to block it, but the immense force sent her body flying, slamming her into a cabinet. The physical and mental pain from stopping her medication, coupled with the strain of using the Yatsufusa, all erupted under the impact, causing her vision to blur. The black-haired boy looked down at her. Kurome, it seems you really can't keep going. I never thought the famous Kurome would meet her end like this. Bang! He pulled the trigger without hesitation. Another burst of fire shot from the muzzle, and the bullet flew toward Kurome's head. Phew! The bullet struck a palm, splattering blood. Who are you? The black-haired boy's eyes narrowed as he took 2 steps back, eyeing the man in front of him warily. He hadn't seen how the man appeared. Aoki ignored him and looked down at Kurome, frowning slightly. Is it really this bad? He had actually been following Kurome. Without her and the sacrifice of those puppets, he wouldn't have been able to obtain the Silver Bead. The reason Kurome entered that secret realm was also because of him. However, Kurome was a killer with an incredibly sharp sense of perception, so Aoki had been careful not to get too close. Although he noticed that Kurome was unwell on the road, he hadn't expected it to be this severe. Aoki. Kurome's vision was blurry, but she still recognized him. Kurome, so you were the one who brought him here. You really did betray us. The black-haired boy's eyes filled with murderous intent. He raised his pistol, aiming it at Aoki. Then you'll both die here together. Aoki glanced at him and suddenly vanished. Where did he go? The black-haired boy tensed up instantly. Just like before, there was no visible trace of Aoki's movement. Could he also be a user of an Imperial tool like Kurome? Phew! An arm pierced through the black-haired boy's chest. His expression froze instantly, his lips trembled twice, and his breath ceased. The remaining 4 assassins' expressions shifted. But instead of fleeing, they rushed at Aoki together. Aoki's figure flashed continuously. All 4 assassins were sent flying almost simultaneously, crashing heavily to the ground. They lost consciousness, their bodies twitching slightly. Aoki walked over to Kurome and found that she had passed out completely. Kurome was training diligently, surrounded by people of similar age, including her sister, and all her companions. Although this life was exhausting, it also brought her immense happiness, filling her heart with pure joy. But suddenly, Kurome sensed that something was wrong. She looked up and noticed that everyone had stopped training and was staring at her. She asked anxiously, "Sister, what's wrong? Why are you all looking at me?" "Traitor!" everyone said in unison. "No. I'm not a traitor," Kurome hurriedly explained. But everyone raised their weapons, their tone cold as they repeated, "Traitor. I'm not a traitor." Kurome cried out, opening her eyes as she sat up, breathing rapidly, and looking around in confusion. "So you're..." Her body stiffened as her consciousness fully cleared, and she remembered the painful truth, she really had become a traitor. After being dazed for a moment, Kurome began to examine the room around her. The completely unfamiliar room was clearly no longer within the assassin's base, but she noticed the Yatsufusa and a bag of snacks placed on the table beside the bed. She recalled seeing Aoki before she fell unconscious. Just as Kurome was lost in thought, the door creaked open, and a familiar figure walked in. Aoki. Aoki looked at Kurome carefully and asked, "How do you feel?" "I feel fine," Kurome replied, but then fell silent. Aoki sat down in the chair next to her. "What are your plans now?" Kurome was silent for a while, then said, "I want to find Wilfred and explain everything." Aoki interrupted her, "Do you think you can really explain it?" Kurome remained silent. She knew all too well that once the Empire issued an order, it was almost impossible to change it. Aoki's expression grew serious. "Kurome, leave the assassination unit." He understood very well that from the moment he appeared, the suspicion surrounding Kurome could no longer be cleared. He had refrained from showing up earlier, precisely for this reason. Kurome's desire to return to the assassination unit meant she couldn't accept his help. His appearance would only complicate matters, forcing Kurome to take a more difficult route to maintain secrecy. In short, whenever he appeared, he brought trouble for Kurome. Of course, in the end, if Kurome was going to be killed, he couldn't afford to worry about all these details. At the same time, he was also aware of Kurome's feelings toward the assassination team. Kurome didn't have any particular loyalty to the Empire itself. Her reluctance to leave the assassination unit stemmed mainly from her inability to abandon her companions and her unwillingness to betray the beliefs of those comrades who had once died fighting for the Empire. "No." Kurome refused, without hesitation. Aoki stated bluntly, "But you've been branded a traitor. Kurome, you know better than anyone that things have gone too far to be saved. Even if you don't want to leave, the assassination unit has no place for you anymore. Your former companions will now see you as an enemy and will stop at nothing to kill you." A deep look of confusion crossed Kurome's face. Aoki continued, "Kurome, it's not you who betrayed the Empire and your companions, it's the Empire that betrayed you." "No. No matter what." Kurome shook her head, raising her voice. It seemed more like she was trying to reinforce her own beliefs rather than explaining to Aoki. "Many of my companions sacrificed their lives for the Empire. How can I betray the Empire and still be worthy of them?" Aoki smiled slightly. "Then perhaps you should die once, too." Kurome looked up at him, puzzled. "Die once? How?" Aoki didn't say anything further. His figure flashed, and suddenly he was right in front of Kurome. Phew! His palm pierced through Kurome's chest, straight into her heart. Kurome's eyes froze, staring at Aoki in shock and disbelief. Chapter 149, The First Subordinate. _________________. Phew! Aoki pulled his hand back. "Is this all right?" he asked. Kurome looked confused. She felt no sadness or fear, only deep confusion. Why? He had saved her before and had tried to persuade her to leave the assassination team, so why had he suddenly decided to kill her? Although they didn't know each other well, after spending a few days together, she was certain that Aoki wasn't an irrational lunatic. Kurome's mind was a mess. The confusion of being forced to become a traitor, the puzzlement over Aoki's sudden decision to kill her, everything that had happened recently felt like a pair of giant hands tearing at her sanity. After some time, Kurome regained some clarity and suddenly realized something was wrong. Why am I not dead yet? Though her body had mutated due to prolonged medication, meaning she wouldn't necessarily die even from a critical injury, her heart had been pierced this time, she should have died long ago. Moreover, she didn't feel any pain and hadn't felt like she was dying at any point. Kurome looked down. There was a tear in her clothing at her chest, and a few spots of scarlet blood remained on her snow-white skin. But where was the wound? Kurome touched her chest instinctively. Was it just her imagination? No. There was blood splattered on the quilt from when her heart was pierced. Kurome suddenly looked up and found Aoki watching her with a smile, showing no sign of surprise. "Aoki, what's going on?" she demanded. "You're actually dead," Aoki replied. 7 days ago, you fainted after fighting the assassins. Wait, 7 days ago? 7 days have passed? Kurome asked, startled. Yes, Aoki nodded. Your body was already on the brink of collapse, and being without your medication for too long caused significant damage. After you lost consciousness, your body completely shut down. When I found you after the fight, your heart had nearly stopped beating. Kurome placed her hand on her chest. Then why am I still alive? Aoki didn't say anything. Instead, he raised his hand and pressed it against his chest. Wait. Kurome realized what he was about to do and tried to stop him, but she was a step too late. Phew. As soon as she opened her mouth, Aoki's hand pierced her chest again. A large amount of blood flowed down her body, soaking her clothes instantly. What are you doing? Kurome exclaimed. Aoki pulled his hand away, and the wound on her chest healed instantly. Kurome was stunned. She looked down at her chest and began to understand. Aoki explained, when we were in the secret realm, you probably noticed that I have a very strong regenerative ability. In fact, not just a pierced heart, even if my head were chopped off or my entire body cut into pieces, I'd recover easily. Is that even possible? The black-eyed girl's mouth opened slightly. During their time in the secret realm, she had noticed Aoki's remarkable recovery ability. Even the Imperial tools didn't seem to possess such power. However, this was Aoki's secret, and she had never questioned him about it. I'm sharing this power with you, Aoki said, taking out a mirror and handing it to Kurome. Becoming a demon would mean losing a lot. Initially, he had planned to get Kurome's consent before turning her into a demon, but her condition was dire. He had no choice but to act first and explain later. After turning Kurome into a demon, he also administered 3 potions to her: Find Yourself, Overcome Cannibalism, and Resist the Sunlight. The combination of these 3 potions significantly reduces the weaknesses of demons. Before leaving the Demon Slayer world, Aoki had specifically asked Miss Tamayo to prepare a few more sets. These potions could be used to save people, create subordinates, or even for trading purposes. The power of a demon, combined with these 3 potions, offered a pathway to eternal life. Although it had certain flaws, the prospect was still incredibly tempting. If utilized properly, it could bring Aoki immense benefits. Kurome looked at herself in the mirror, noticing her eyes had turned into blood-red, vertical pupils, and 4 sharp canine teeth had grown in her mouth. I see. No wonder I felt some changes in my body after waking up. It wasn't that she felt uncomfortable, on the contrary, she felt too comfortable. All the discomfort from prolonged medication, constant fighting, and injuries had vanished. Aoki chuckled. Do you understand now? You are indeed dead, but you've been reborn in another form. You can now honor your former companions and the Empire even more. Kurome's expression was conflicted. Aoki, knowing she needed a push, added, I paid a huge price to save you. You can't just ignore that, right? How do I repay you? Kurome asked, looking at him. Aoki stroked his chin thoughtfully. Work for me, for free, for 1,000 years. Since she had become a demon, she was now his subordinate. In the future, when dealing with 3 other super dangerous species, he would need help. Kurome was undoubtedly one of the best candidates. 1,000 years? Heitan gasped. How is that possible? I can't live that long. Aoki replied, you weren't capable before, but now things are different. Kurome immediately caught on. Can this power extend my lifespan? Aoki nodded. Kurome hesitated for a moment. How long can I live now? You can live until you get bored, Aoki said. Bored of living? Kurome asked, puzzled. Aoki explained, as long as you don't actively seek death, it will be nearly impossible to die. No, even if you want to commit suicide, it would be difficult to succeed. After battling with the super dangerous species, Aoki realized he had previously overestimated them. Their power wasn't limitless, and their powerful attacks couldn't be sustained indefinitely. At least, a single super dangerous species wasn't enough to kill him. And, of course, it wouldn't be enough to kill Kurome either. Now that she had become a demon, her strength had increased significantly. Hearing this, Kurome's mouth slightly opened, a silly and cute expression on her face. Eternal life? Could this power truly grant eternal life? Is there really something in the world that can make someone immortal? Aoki patted her shoulder. In short, you no longer owe the Empire or your companions. But now, you owe me. Got it? I understand. Kurome nodded, still looking somewhat dazed. Aoki thought for a moment, before adding, my power is strong, but it's not without its drawbacks. What are the drawbacks? You might have noticed I never ate anything during our time in the secret realm, Aoki said. Didn't you eat secretly while I was asleep? Kurome asked, puzzled. I didn't cheat. Anyway, you'll gradually experience the disadvantages. One of them is that, from now on, you can only survive on human blood. Of course, only a small amount is needed. The good news, Aoki continued, is that you won't need to eat anymore. Isn't that an advantage? Kurome asked blankly. Aoki looked away, a bit embarrassed. Not exactly. Although you don't need to eat, you also can't taste food anymore. Both Kurome and her sister were big foodies. Not being able to eat was definitely a huge disadvantage for them. Ah? Kurome's face changed as she quickly grabbed the bag of snacks on the table next to her. Just as she was about to eat, she hesitated. Aoki reassured her, it's okay, those are just ordinary snacks. Kurome glanced at him, then took out a biscuit and stuffed it into her mouth. She chewed it twice, then gradually stopped moving as her expression froze. Chapter 150, Imperial Capital. _______. Kurome followed Aoki out of the room. Come on, Aoki said, don't look so dejected. How can an immortal life and an infinitely regenerating body come without any cost? Kurome glanced at him with a resentful look. Aoki laughed and said, don't worry, I'm working on solving this problem. It's not entirely impossible to taste food again. Kurome perked up, looking very excited. Really? Really? Aoki nodded. But it may take some time. A smile appeared on Kurome's face. Well, now we have all the time in the world, don't we? That's right. Aoki raised the back of his hand and looked at it. The energy in the World Shuttle mark was fully charged. He could sense that the pole was far to the west, likely beyond the Empire's borders. But for now, his goal remained unachieved, so he wasn't in a hurry to leave and had no immediate plans to seek out the pole. Let's go, Aoki said, let's find a place to replenish your puppets, and then head to the Imperial capital. Aoki started walking forward, and Kurome followed briskly, her hands clasped behind her back. What are you going to do in the Imperial capital? She asked. Kill the Emperor, Aoki replied. Why? Squeak. Squeak. A carriage drove slowly and stopped at the city gate. The old man with a white beard lifted the curtain. Aoki, Kurome, we've arrived at the Imperial capital. A man and a woman stepped down from the carriage. The man was tall and handsome, and the girl wore a black dress, with a pretty face and a slim figure. Aoki looked up, and a majestic city came into view. The Imperial capital was built on a mountain, with the terrain rising towards the center where the Imperial palace stood. Even from outside the city, the luxurious palace was visible. Imperial capital, Kurome murmured, her expression complex. She was back, but in a completely new identity. She wondered if her wanted posters were plastered all over the capital by now. Aoki turned to the old man. Thank you, sir. On the way here, Aoki had helped the old man with a small problem, and in return, the old man had insisted on bringing them to the city. Aoki agreed, curious about riding in a carriage. The bearded old man shook his head and hesitated for a moment before saying, Aoki, Kurome, be careful while living in the Imperial capital. It's not a peaceful place. Aoki pretended to be naive. The Imperial capital is the center of the Empire. How could there be enemies here? Not enemies, no, not enemies. Just, be careful. The old man shook his head and sighed. Aoki and Kurome watched him leave, then turned and walked towards the Imperial capital. The magnificent city walls bore the marks of time. This city had a history of more than 1,000 years. It looked prosperous, but in reality, it was riddled with decay. Aoki sniffed the air lightly. The smell of decay. In the city where Mitsuri Kanroji lived, the Fujita family had established the Yahime Society, kidnapping many girls for themselves and other powerful people to fulfill their dark desires. But in this city, the Fujita family and the Yahime Society were everywhere. Kurome was stunned. My sister, Akame, betrayed the Empire, joined the Revolutionary Army, and has been fighting to overthrow the Empire. It's a night raid, Aoki said, glancing around at the half-naked homeless people scattered along the roadside. Kurome looked up at him. Aoki, you know about them? How could I not have heard of the infamous Akame and her one-hit kill demon sword, Murasame? Aoki said with a smile. Infamous. Kurome echoed quietly. Kurome pursed her lips. No way. My sister is incredible for being willing to fight for the people and change the world. You really admire your sister, Aoki observed. Of course, I love my sister the most, but... Kurome's expression grew somber. I once wanted to kill her, to turn her into a puppet with the Yatsufusa. It was crazy. Aoki remained silent. In truth, Akame also wanted to kill Kurome, to free her from the Empire's control. They truly were sisters, both extreme in their ways. However, after stopping the medication, Kurome's mental state gradually returned to normal, and her thoughts were no longer so morbid. Do you want to see Akame? Aoki asked. See my sister? Kurome's face lit up with anticipation. Aoki chuckled. After all, you've now betrayed the Empire. You're no longer in a position to be her enemy. Kurome glared at Aoki, annoyed. This guy really knew how to rub salt in her wounds. But soon, she started to laugh, her eyes filled with longing, and her face showing a youthful excitement. Yes, there's no need to be my sister's enemy anymore. Plus, I don't have to take those meds anymore, and my body is getting better. I have so much good news to share with her. We'll see, Aoki said. Night raids are happening all over the Imperial capital, and they'll only increase. We'll definitely cross paths with her one day. Suddenly, there was a loud noise. The two of them looked around and quickly figured out what had happened. A homeless man had died. This wasn't unusual. The crowd quickly dispersed, and the body was dragged away by the security team. After they moved on, Kurome asked, Is all of this Minister Honest's fault? Aoki shook his head. The ice is 3 feet thick, it didn't freeze overnight. Minister Honest only accelerated this process. He didn't create this situation, he's not capable of that. This country has been rotting at its core for thousands of years. When a nation is on the brink of collapse, evil emerges. Honest is that evil, the one who finally pushed the Empire into the abyss. In fact, the Empire had lasted 1,000 years simply because the Imperial arms were so powerful. Its death alone was worth an entire army. The Shikudazur was practically a god on earth. If many Imperial weapons hadn't been lost in the Civil War hundreds of years ago, it would have been nearly impossible for ordinary people to overthrow the Empire, even in its current state of decay. This was the terrifying nature of supernatural power. Kurome remarked, My sister, or rather, the night raid, seems to have always targeted the ministers. Can killing the ministers really change this country? Aoki replied, It will definitely help, but it's hard to say how long those changes will last. You'll see it for yourself. The night raid and the Revolutionary Army eventually overthrew the Empire and established a new country. But it also left behind many hidden dangers. No one can predict how the future will unfold. And what about us? Kurome looked at Aoki. What should we do? Didn't I tell you? Our goal is to kill the Emperor and seize the Shikudazur. Huh? Are you really going to kill the Emperor? Of course. Do you think I'm joking? What is the Shikudazur? Your history lessons must have been lacking. The Shikudazur is the original and most powerful Imperial weapon. The two figures gradually disappeared into the distance.